Chapter 693. Nefarian said loudly that dragons were the strongest creatures in Azeroth. One had to know that these tribes were all country bumpkins. Before they had seen the crazy elemental lords, the titans, and the even crazier ancient gods, his words could really scare the country bumpkins. Nefarian's vanity was greatly satisfied by the orc's expressions that clearly said, "You're right, we admire you." He pointed to a particularly large black dragon with two huge horns on its forehead. Sabrian. When he called out the black dragon's name, the other black dragons all lowered their heads. "He's my first lieutenant. He's in charge of all matters. He and a few other companions will carry your orcs to the island you mentioned. As for the trip to Dalajan, I'll personally bring you there." None of the orcs or Death Knights dared to disobey Nefarian's words. Using the demon soul to control a dragon aspect, or even an entire dragon legion, was already in the past 2 years ago. If grass could grow on Zulahid's grave, it would be at least a foot tall. In fact, the corpse of the former Dragon Maw chief was pushed into the middle of the scorching canyon along with the remains of the 200,000 orcs by the Alliance's logistics team. It was the lava fissure that the giant fire elemental Baron Geddon had emerged from. The orcs only quietly sensed and feared the power contained in every simple word of the giant dragon king that had taken human form. They watched curiously and attentively as Nefarian bypassed their new chief and directly gave orders to each of the chiefs. Compared to his father, the former Black Dragon Prince, the current Black Dragon King Nefarian seemed to know more about the way of commanding his subordinates. Blindly pressuring them would not be able to exchange for loyalty. Even so-called obedience would be greatly reduced. Nefarian's masculine lips curled up slightly. He spoke again. "Of course, I have no intention of becoming your master. Your strong request is an exception. Now, we can only be called, so-called allies with the same interests." His words immediately made the tribal chiefs feel much better. Nefarian's smile became even more mysterious. "You won't be the only opponents of the Alliance. The Black Dragon Legion will lead you to the Tirisful Glades to find Grom Helroar's Warsong clan. At the same time, I will let Brother Blackhand's Blacktooth clan dispatch troops from the Burning Steppes to attack the Reedridge Mountain and attack the Alliance's retreat." Blackhand brothers? Rend and Maim. Zul was stunned by this unexpected news. Yes. After completing the quest from Great Chief Orgrim in the Mausoleum of Sargeras in the Endless Sea, they came to Blackrock Mountain and foolishly occupied Blackrock Stronghold. If I hadn't shown them the right way, they would have been dead by now. Now, they are my servants. Nefarian raised his chin arrogantly. This was definitely great news for the main force of the Horde trapped in the Cursed Lands. After all, there was nothing in the Cursed Lands apart from the red soil that had lost its vitality. Even the supplies had to be transported over from Draenor. Zul really couldn't imagine what would happen if there were hundreds of thousands of beastmen crowded here. Perhaps the Alliance wouldn't even need to destroy them. They would starve to death here, or kill each other, leading to destruction. However, Nefarian's gift wasn't limited to this. Like a magic trick, he took out an item from his interspatial storage bag. When the tribal chiefs saw this thing under the hazy moonlight, they couldn't help but exclaim in unison. What did they see? The head of the great traitor of the Horde, the former warlock King Gul'dan, who was believed to have directly caused the defeat of the Alliance in the war against the Alliance. His sinister face was still frozen with a horrified expression. His life, his sins, his self-inflicted suffering, all stopped at the moment before his death. Looking at his expression, one could completely imagine the huge gap of loss and panic when he confidently wanted to steal the power of the fallen titan Sargeras, only to suffer the fiercest backlash of the demon tide. No one knew how Nefarian did it, but in any case, Gul'dan's head didn't have any decay, and was presented in front of the Horde in its entirety. Can I see this traitor's head? Of course. Nefarian casually tossed Ghoul Dan's head to the ground like a bag of garbage. Several Beastman Kiliarchs lit torches to make the scene more obvious. The tribal chiefs of the first-rate clans gathered in a circle and watched with angry expressions. It's him. It's definitely him. That unfilial disciple of mine, ha ha ha. Ghoul Dan. You also got your retribution. Is this what you'll get in the end? Ha ha ha. As Ghoul Dan's former master, Zul had the absolute right to decide on the head. For a moment, the tribal chiefs burst into enthusiastic cheers. If they hadn't been beaten like dogs by the Alliance half an hour ago, they really wanted to hold a grand bonfire party to celebrate Ghoul Dan's death. Final end? No. Obviously, this great traitor of the Horde can still atone for his crimes in his own unique way. Nefarian's bewitching voice gave Zul a premonition that he couldn't refuse his next proposal. Nefarian pointed in the air, and Ghoul Dan's hideous head began to rapidly wither under the watchful eyes of all the tribal chiefs. The few hairs were the first to dry up and turn into ashes that dissipated into the air. Then, the skin and scalp attached to the skull, as well as the shriveled brain, began to fall to the ground piece by piece. Finally, what appeared in front of everyone was a hideous white-brown beastman skull. However, the thick evil and dark aura that wrapped around the skull told everyone how powerful the owner of the skull was when he was alive. This is... Zul's hands were trembling. Since this is a divine weapon made from Ghoul Dan's head, you can call it Ghoul Dan's skull. The Black Dragon King Nefarian's smile became even wider. Ha. Ha ha ha. Ha ha ha. Zul couldn't hold it in anymore and raised the Ghoul Dan's skull high up in the air as he laughed maniacally. My disciple. Is this what you'll get? Even in death, you will continue to fight for the Horde. Ha ha ha. Not only Zul, but the other tribal chiefs also laughed as if they had gotten their revenge. When the orcs finished celebrating, Nefarian waved his hand. Go. Zul, the third thing you want is in Karazhan. Use your new divine weapon to destroy that weak human brat, Duke Marcus. Of course. I will go. Zul's old body seemed to have become younger with the support of this new powerful force. Chapter 694. The night grew darker. After confirming that the tribe had hidden to the south of the dark portal, Lothar ordered a halt to the bombardment that had lasted for half an hour. First, there were no more targets to bomb. Second, the most threatening shots were enough. Third, Muradin also said that if this continued, the first thing that would collapse would be the overheated cannons. Forcing the cannons to cool down would only make the quality of the cannons more likely to explode. In order to satisfy the power and range, the inhumane dwarves made the cannons very exaggerated. Of course, it would be even more exaggerated when the cannons exploded. This meant that it was very likely that an entire elite artillery team would be wiped out. Anduin sent out the largest team of bandits and a team of rangers led by Servanas to monitor the tribe. Pass the order, divide the soldiers into 4 groups and take turns until dawn. The flying soil and smoke gradually subsided, replaced by a veritable darkness. Standing on the city wall, Anduin gazed at the indescribable darkness that seemed to be dancing in the distance. Everything was basically the same as the plan had imagined. Anduin still had a faint sense of uneasiness. He fell into deep thought, thinking about the tribe's next move. The others were smart enough to keep silent. The only sounds that could be heard were the crackling of the flames and the occasional whispers of others. Suddenly, there was a sound in the darkness. Everyone jumped up, and the tension was like a taut bowstring. What's that sound? Turalian was the most sensitive. Damn it! It's a dragon. Kudrin Wildhammer was not here. The commander of the 500 Griffin Knights was a distant relative of Kudrin, Farron, and his official rank was the Brigadier General of the Alliance. Are you sure? Anduin asked nervously. I swear by Mother Earth. I've been fighting with these guys for almost a year. I'd even wake up when I hear the sound of their wings when I'm sleeping. That's right. It's a dragon. Another Griffin Knight commander, Bephalon, answered with the same certainty. Holy light above, where did the tribe get a dragon? Didn't the Red Dragon Legion return to neutrality? Turalian asked. Only Krasis' face turned green. Only dragons knew dragons the best. Although he was a red dragon who spent most of his time in the human world, his exaggerated age gave him no lack of experience in this area. He said with absolute certainty, "It's not a red dragon. It's a black dragon." Krasis could tell just by listening to the sound of the dragon's wings. This was unimaginable to humans. It's like looking at a bunch of poodles. If they're all about the same size, you really can't tell the difference between them. But they knew what they were doing. Ah! Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The Black Dragon army joined the war between the Alliance and the Horde? Krasis' face was indescribably calm. If the Black Dragon Legion dares to come out on their own, then they will be seeking their own death. That's right. Nisario had been executed. But now, the Black Dragon army was still listed as an enemy by the Dragon Slumber Shrine. The world of Azeroth was so big that it would not be easy to find the Black Dragons if they wanted to hide. If they officially joined the Horde and started a war against the Alliance, it would be a different story. The four-colored dragons, whose claws had long since been polished until they were shining, would definitely not mind giving their former compatriots and traitors the most vicious blows. I need a magic message to see if I can contact the Red Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, Krasis said. Her Majesty Alexstrasza, is she busy now? Anduin asked slightly nervously. Whether there was the Red Dragon Legion as backup was crucial to the Alliance. Krasis had a slightly strange look on his face. I'm not too sure, but I heard that she is not in the Dragon Slumber Shrine at the moment. The long night finally passed, and the sky was just beginning to brighten. The big shots of the Alliance were all stunned by the scene in front of them. With the Door of Darkness in the east and west as the dividing line, the north was full of densely packed shell craters. The south was almost intact because a large number of large and small spatial rifts had appeared on the dividing line, and demonic creatures were constantly coming out of them. The total number of demons was not too many, probably around 1,000. From imps to void demons, from hellhounds to demon guards, they basically included all the types of demons in the middle and lower levels of the Burning Legion. The demonic creatures did not seem to have any intention of attacking. They just wandered around the spatial rift. But this was enough to make the stealth of the Alliance bandits meaningless. The senses of demonic creatures and ordinary creatures were completely different things. After several elite bandits were killed by the demonic creatures, MI7 had no choice but to give up the idea of further investigating the situation of the tribe. This was just the beginning. The Alliance soon discovered that the tribe had also begun to dig up the terrifying red soil of the cursed land along the dividing line. They piled up the soil into mountains, looking like they were going to make a long wall and confront the Alliance until the end of time. What the hell are those green skins doing? That night, a sharp wail pierced through the silent Dalajan sky. Antonidas, who was discussing the situation of the tribe and the Alliance with Kale, jumped up. It was the sound of a magic alarm. Antonidas immediately recognized the source of it. Mysterious treasure room. He had clearly been warned by Duque, and he had also strengthened the defenses of the treasure room. He did not expect that it would still be invaded. Kale's eyes widened. The expression on his face at the moment was filled with surprise and shock, just like his mood. The mysterious treasure room was located in the center of Violet Castle. It was protected by the most powerful magic that mages had ever invented. There were many divine artifacts hidden inside, as well as some items that mages could not use but could not risk letting fall into the hands of others, such as magic artifacts. In terms of defense, it was definitely not inferior to Silvermoon City's Sunstrider royal treasury. How is this possible? Kale, that's muttered in his heart. He stretched out his hand for Antonidas to grasp. Without the authority of the chairman, no one could even think about teleporting in. It should have been like this. The two of them teleported to the mysterious treasure room without a word. The world around them began to blur, and Antonidas' comfortable room with its walls lined with books disappeared, replaced by a huge stone chamber. Within the area illuminated by the firelight, a man stood amidst the countless treasures. He had shiny black hair, a strong and tall figure, and a chiseled yet elegant face. Even for Kale, that's the elf prince who was very picky about his appearance, this human in front of him could be considered very handsome. Chapter 695. He wore finely tailored clothes, and an undamaged, gem-studded longsword hung at his side. His face was slightly twisted with contempt. The man brushed his sleeves as if he wanted to wipe something off. Both he and Antonidas saw through the appearance and saw the essence of the man. They both cried out in unison. Black Dragon? Nefario? Antonidas could not be blamed for mistaking him for someone else. He could only blame the man in front of him for being almost identical to the former Lord of Pristos. However, unlike the Lord of Pristos, the man in front of him did not conceal his dragon aura at all. No, this was not concealment. This was showing off and showing off. He was younger and more arrogant. The floor and walls of the treasure room were roughly chiseled from the solid rock strata of the earth, and the ceiling was arched. There were no windows in the room, and only one door. Apart from the empty space near the exit, the rest of the room was filled with partitions, boxes, and bookcases, all of which were filled with various treasures. Amidst the dust and those items, a few people stood. Although they were in human form, Antonidas' senses detected the black aura surrounding them. But before they turned around and revealed their shining eyes under their hoods, Antonidas already knew their identities. They were the terrifying existences that once gave the Alliance the most headaches in the Horde. It was unknown whether they should be included in the biological domain, the Death Knights. Now, several Death Knights surrounded the Black Dragon who had transformed into a human man like stars surrounding the moon. This terrible situation made Antonidas, a Breaking Dawn Archmage, panic. He. This great existence in front of me is the new king of the Black Dragons, Nefarian. Old man, don't mistake him for someone else. Tyren Gorfiend cackled. Nefarian? Compared to his father, Nesario, Nefarian's reputation was definitely much worse. Kale, that's just frowned deeply. Only Antonidas, who had come into contact with countless confidential information, knew that Nefarian had a completely different way of doing things from his father. Rather than saying that Nefarian was a dragon, it would be better to say that he was an absolute anomaly among the dragons. There were rumors that Nefarian was collecting the corpses of different types of dragons. Compared to the capricious dragon king like Nazario who still solved problems with power, Nefarian's approach was more far-sighted and mysterious. Antonidas did not know what Nefarian's high-profile appearance in the Dalajan's top-secret treasure vault meant, but the uneasiness in his heart reached its peak when Nefarian gently lifted the item in his hand. The light reflected off its facets and illuminated the entire room. Antonidas obviously knew what kind of treasure could make the Death Knights and even the Black Dragon King ignore the other treasures. Unfortunately, even though he knew that the other party was here for that thing, Antonidas still held on to the last sliver of hope. Until this moment, the eye of the Dalajan? Antonidas shouted with all his might. With boundless anger and the self-confidence of being on the home ground of the Dalajan, Antonidas fought with all his might. In an instant, he raised one hand and cast a mysterious charm. With the other hand, he summoned the other members of the Kirin Tor. The Kirin Tor chairman never fought alone. Kale, that's put one hand on his right shoulder. Almost instantly, he connected his arcane circuit with Antonida's magic circuit for a short period of time, using his own magic to support the chairman. Another member of the Kirin Tor teleported to his side. It was an elf woman with long black hair. A long, pale hand rested on Antonida's left shoulder, while the other hand, holding the staff, pointed at the fearsome invaders. Antonida's hair and beard moved without any wind, like a hedgehog with its spikes erected. His hair and clothes were all stretched out by the surging magic in his body. Endless ice hell. It was too fast. It was so fast that it didn't seem like ice magic. It was more like some kind of flame that could arrive in an instant. In less than a tenth of a blink of an eye, the entire treasure room was frozen with Antonida's at the center. A Death Knight tried to use dark magic to block this attack, but the wave of extreme cold directly hit the Death Knight's torso and slammed him into the wall in the distance. His chest was shattered because of the impact, but in the next moment, the pieces of armor that burst out of his chest, along with his entire body, were completely frozen under a thick layer of ice. However, the smartest Death Knights, such as Tyran Gorfiend, chose to hide behind Nefarian. In just 1/100th of a second, even the famous Nefarian would be trapped in this underground treasure room that could gather the magic of more than 300 mage towers in the Dalajan. It didn't matter if it was the Black Dragon King or a dragon aspect. With this earth-shattering magic, Antonidas dared to fight it. At this moment, Nefarian's lips curled into a smile, causing the Breaking Dawn mage's heart to skip a beat. In front of Nefarian, a smooth blue magic shield suddenly appeared. The brilliance was so beautiful that it felt as if the sweeping ice elements had collided with a huge blue dragon scale. Antonidas was so shocked that he almost bit his tongue off. For a moment, he almost thought that he was attacking the king of magic, Maligos. Before he could react, his magic was reflected back at him. The power of endless ice hell was instantly compressed, turning into a large hand made of ice fog that was reflected back at twice the speed to attack its master. Antonidas suddenly felt as if he was grabbed by a pair of cold hands, and the endless cold began to squeeze his heart. He grabbed his chest tightly with both hands, trying to overcome the pain that was like angina. In the end, the Breaking Dawn mage was able to cast a spell. A purplish-red light danced around him, dispersing the cold in his body. He tried to take a deep breath, letting the cold out of his body. Fortunately, his lungs finally began to expand, his heart began to beat again, and the warm feeling returned to his body. His powerful spell saved his life, while the elf prince relied on his incomparably precious magic items to get through this difficult time. However, the female elf counselor was not so lucky. Her pale face was twisted, and her whole body fell backwards. Her black hair wrapped around her like a shroud. Anyone could see that the extreme cold had taken her life. Sahira. No! Ignoring the old mage's scream and the elf prince's angry gaze, Nefarian threw the Dalajan eye to Tyran Gorfiend as if it was a copper coin. Let's go. Chapter 696. Antonidas looked on in despair. Was this the power of an ancient dragon that stood at the top of the world? The Breaking Dawn mage's full strength, no, even the combined attack of 2 Kirin Tor senators at the peak of the Radiant Moon level, was not enough to defeat Nefarian? The old mage suddenly realized that's anger. The prince watched his good friend and colleague die, his handsome face twisted with anger. However, when he raised his chin, he did not have the courage to look Nefarian in the eye. Blasphemer! Leave the Dalajan eye behind. The prince tried to attack Tyran directly, but a Death Knight who quickly moved in front of Tyran blocked his magic. As if to vent his anger at the death of his good friend, the elven prince raised and separated his hands that were filled with magic power. Almost at the same time, the Death Knight began to scream in pain. His limbs were torn off one by one, separated from his torso. The shocking scene made Antonidas regain his senses. The Breaking Dawn mage finally saw it. If he had not attacked Nefarian directly, the Black Dragon King would not have bothered to intervene in the battle of mortals like them. This might be an opportunity, even if it was the pity of the most powerful enemy. Kill all the Death Knights. The old mage was still angry. On the other side, Nefarian opened the portal leisurely. On the other side, another Kirin Tor senator teleported over and joined the fierce battle against the Death Knights. Unfortunately, it was too late. The three archmages looked at the invaders with eyes full of anger. So what? As Nefarian entered the portal, the Death Knights began to blur. The Dalajan mages did not dare to follow because they could clearly feel the draconic aura of more black dragons coming from the other side of the portal. They could not be sure of the extent of the cooperation between the Black Dragon army and the Horde. If they continued to chase, it was very likely that the Black Dragons would be angered. It was very likely that they would set the entire Violet Castle on fire before the Red Dragon army arrived. A few more mages arrived, but just like their chairman, they fell into a dejected silence. Antonidas couldn't help but look at at this noble prince who was also regarded as a representative of the new generation. He suddenly understood why the Alliance's hero was Duque and not This elegant prince seemed perfect, but he lacked the most crucial courage and boldness. When Nesario was wreaking havoc on Lordaeron, only two mortal heroes dared to attack him head-on, Duque and Uther. who was also present at the time, was not there. However, Antonidas did not have the right to criticize Prince that's because he, too, lacked the courage to fight a godlike enemy. His heart was filled with disappointment. He and the other members of the Kirin Tor had always been the pride of the Dalajan, the protectors of the city, but tonight he had failed. He finally knew his limits. It turned out that he was just a slightly more powerful mortal. In the end, he did not have the courage to fight against a godlike existence. He stared at the starry sky, and his heart was filled with regret. After all, he had watched the enemy take away the Dalajan's eye, one of the most powerful artifacts in the City of Mages. Antonidas knew very well what it meant to lose this artifact. When Duque had visited, he and Duque had discussed this issue. The Dalajan's eye represented supreme arcane power. It could provide the most powerful source of power for the Dark Portal. The Sargeras' scepter represented supreme control. It allowed Zul to easily control every bit of power that was poured into the Dark Portal. The Book of Mediv depicted the spatial barrier structure of the entire planet Azeroth. With it, Zul could open the Dark Portal in any corner of the planet Azeroth, including the main cities of every kingdom. Fortunately, we only lost a divine artifact, Antonidas comforted himself. Soon, he was slapped in the face. The sentinel sent by the Red Dragon Legion to the tomb of Sargeras in the Endless Sea sent a magical image. A terrible demon had been defeated. It was killed by a group of heroic orcs. It could be clearly seen that the orcs had taken a long stick from one of its claws. It looked like a spear with a wooden handle and a silver tail. The long stick was inlaid with a huge gem that emitted a dazzling white light. There were many sharp thorns gathered on the gem. The brilliance of the gem made the darkness in the room pale in comparison. From time to time, the gem would emit sparks, but in the end, it would disappear into the darkness. Obviously, that was the Sargeras' scepter, the artifact that Zul had dreamed of obtaining. Within a day, two of their most important divine items were stolen by the tribe. As a result, the news of Grom Hellscream leading a counterattack in the Silverpine Forest and the Blackhand brothers leading an army to attack the Reedridge Mountains were both shocking news. The higher-ups of the Alliance finally realized that the attacks of the entire Horde in the Eastern Kingdom were actually all feints to cover up their actions of stealing the artifacts. Of course, they didn't know that the purpose of Zul stealing the three artifacts was just to escape. But in any case, the terrifying possibility of their king being directly blown up was enough to drive them crazy. Those useless Dalajan mages. They actually let the artifacts be stolen even when they knew that something might happen. But that's Nefarian, the king of the black dragons. Who can deal with him? If we gather all the power of the Dalajan and Kuel Salis, no matter how the higher-ups of the alliance discussed, everyone had to look at Karazhan. Duque was the last line of defense of the entire alliance. If even the Book of Mediv, that Duque was in charge of, was stolen, the entire alliance would probably fall into endless panic. No one thought that the pressure on Duque was even greater. This was because Duque had to face the artifact, Gul'dan's skull. He couldn't beat him, so he had to kill the Lich King Ne-Zul. Standing on the scorched land in front of Karazhan, Ne-Zul looked at the tower in the distance that was shining with mysterious arcane light, but he wasn't nervous at all. He couldn't hear the howling of ghosts when the wind blew against the wind, because the sound of the wind couldn't compare to the whispers echoing in Ne-Zul's ears. He held the head in his hand and looked deep into the hollow eye sockets. Then he heard Gul'dan's voice. To Ne-Zul, the voice that came from the soul seemed to have a life of its own. Chapter 697. Even though Gul'dan was dead, he still hoped to do what he did when he was alive, and make his former mentor lose his mind once again. However, Ne-Zul would never be fooled a second time. In the past, he was too gullible. He believed in Gul'dan and Kil'jaeden's illusion, which made him inadvertently betray his people. It was guilt that made him give up his power, and it was fear of Kil'jaeden that made him give up pursuing Gul'dan. The funny thing was that Gul'dan thought that he had defeated the old shaman. My good disciple, open your eyes of the soul and see who is still alive. Who still holds the power of the entire tribe? And who died, and was reviled by millions and millions of orcs, aha! He whispered to the head. As he spoke, Ne-Zul laughed. Ne-Zul had never been a weakling, whether it was the former number 1 orc shaman or a warlock who had lost his shaman powers. However, even with the skull of Gul'dan, that had absorbed part of Sargeraz's power, Ne-Zul still did not dare to attack Karazhan head-on. Relying on Gul'dan's memories, he knew very well how terrifying the magical defenses of Karazhan were. Although he did not know to what extent the weak Duke Marcus could use Karazhan's defensive system, Ne-Zul's cautious personality made him not dare to take risks. Fortunately, he did not need to take risks. Gul'dan had once used the dream technique to spy on Mediv. It was a tragic and failed attempt, but Gul'dan was not completely empty-handed. At least, Gul'dan knew a few backdoors. Ne-Zul tried a few easier backdoors, but was shocked to find that the flaws in the spatial barrier had already been filled. Ne-Zul frowned. According to the information provided by the Black Dragon Army, Duque's Radiant Moon Archmage was about the same level as him 10 years ago. Logically speaking, Duque should not have such exquisite spatial magic attainments. Ne-Zul had to look for a flaw that was one level lower. If it was anywhere else, it would not be easy to find. Don't forget, Karazhan itself was the most active area in the entire Azeroth space. Every day, there would be hundreds of large and small spatial cracks in different areas of the Mage Tower. Some were so small that they could not pass through at all, and some were death traps that could crush any creature. It took Ne-Zul a full hour to find a crack that he could safely pass through. Found it. With a gentle wave of his hand, a dazzling spatial passage appeared in front of him. He waved his hand gently, and a dazzling spatial passage appeared in front of him. That's right, when Gul'dan established the Storm Predator clan and the Shadow Council, many of the backbones came from Ne-Zul's Shadow Moon clan. At that time, Ne-Zul had lost power. Many shamans turned into warlocks and sought refuge with Gul'dan, but there were still many warlocks who chose to support Ne-Zul. After Orgrim took advantage of Gul'dan while Gul'dan was unconscious to clear the shadow of the Shadow Moon Orgs under Gul'dan. Gul'Zul. The 4 powerful warlocks continued to reinforce the spatial passage, while 2 warlocks summoned several fiend guards with the height of 2 people and blue skin to take the lead and rush over. Feeling the intense elemental fluctuations coming from the other side of the passage, Zul did not care. He gently blessed himself with a huge magic shield and strode in with his head held high. Evil must be destroyed. It was a deep female voice. When his vision returned to normal, the first thing Zul saw was a huge stone female giant. She was casting golden holy flames, and almost instantly killing the demon guards that rushed forward. His 2 high-grade warlocks could not hold on any longer. Zul was a little embarrassed. In his imagination, Duque was at the same level as his 2 subordinates. Who would have thought that he would be restrained by the otherworldly creature that guarded the other side? Humph. Zul gently raised the skull of Ghoul Dan in his left hand. He used the unparalleled evil magic in the skull to cast a summon. The space in front of Zul twisted, and then a creature that came completely from the void appeared. He could have summoned a powerful demon, but unfortunately, he did not dare to use the power of the demon too much. He was worried that his summoning of a powerful demon would attract the attention of Kill Jaden. After all, he signed a blood contract with Kill Jaden, and then he used the shaman's methods to deceive the deceiver. After taking benefits from Kill Jaden, he did not obey Kill Jaden's orders. It was a very large nightmare creature. It was much taller than a human, it was much taller than any orc. In front of the female giant, it was a full head taller. Its skin was covered with scales, and there were lumps that could burst at any time all over its body. It looked like the surface of its body was like a liquid. There were protruding spikes on its shoulders, forearms, chest, and other places. At the end of its long arms was a huge palm with long claws. The bottom of its face was too narrow, and the top was too wide, forming an inverted triangular head. Its slanted eyes glowed a smoky yellow, and one of its small mouths was filled with sharp fangs. Behind it, a tail was swaying from side to side. What exactly it was, Zul did not know. As soon as it appeared, it wanted to devour Zul, but the power of the skull of Ghoul Dan easily suppressed its will. The huge monster suddenly jumped on the female giant, who was wrapped in holy light, and wrestled with the female giant. The female giant's holy light burned its body, causing it to scream. However, after the lumps on its body burst, the acid that flowed out also hurt the female giant. In the next moment, a powerful arcane puppet wrapped in lightning blocked in front of him. Zul gave a contemptuous smile, and another powerful summoned creature came out, suppressing this huge guard. The 2 huge existences fought on the huge balcony. Zul frowned. The defense of Karazhan was higher than he thought. However, he only had 2 slots for ordinary top-level summons. Gritting his teeth, Zul had no choice but to use Ghoul Dan's soul to summon a huge hellfire that was wrapped in flames. This kind of war machine, which was made of huge green stones that kept burning, did not have much self-awareness. As long as the soul imprint on it was erased after use, it should not be discovered by Kill Jaden. Just like that, surrounded by several orc warlocks, Zul went into Karazhan with the hellfire opening the way. When the hellfire kicked open the wooden door in front, Zul and a red-haired female elf, who was scooping meatballs from a steaming hot pot, looked at each other in a daze. Chapter 698. Did Duque not do anything when the sun and the moon were fighting so fiercely outside? Impossible. Duque, who had always planned before taking action, thought about Zul for a long time. He gave up the idea of gathering all 3 artifacts. After all, he couldn't get Sargeraz's scepter. What if he courted death by trying? Perhaps a few tenths of Sargeraz's remaining divine will could kill him with that tiny body of his. He couldn't get the Dalajan's eye either. That thing was the national treasure of the Dalajan. Even if he notified it, he would have done his best. The only thing he had a chance to save was the Mediva's book. Duque didn't want to go to Draenor to play. He wasn't afraid that he would go to Draenor after beating up Kill Jaden's adjutant and his army commander. After all, Kill Jaden should have been delayed by something in the original history. Duque was afraid of the earth-shattering explosion that blew Draenor apart. In the original timeline, Turalyon and Aurelia were killed, and Khadgar was blown to wander in the void for who knows how many years before he survived. Big brother, don't play. Withstanding a nuclear explosion with the body of a mortal, how could it be possible for a human to do that? Even without the explosion, Duque wasn't optimistic about the expedition to the Outland. The alliance was full of internal conflicts, and it would be difficult to defeat a fleeing Zul with just a few 100,000 expeditionary troops. To conquer Draenor, which was not much smaller than planet Azeroth? Did they want to kill the beast men with just these few people? How was that possible? After going around in a big circle in his mind, the simplest way was to protect the Mediva's book, block the watchtower, and then slowly fortify the entire blasted land. As long as they could do it, after a few decades, the tribe would be finished in Draenor. Since he had made up his mind, it was easy. The biggest difference from the original history was that something as important as the Book of Mediv wasn't placed in Stormwind City's library to be managed. Doing that would be stupid. What was the difference between that and an unprotected child taking a huge sum of money and running around a bandit's den? The Book of Mediv was in Karazhan, and Duque carried it with him. That was not enough. Therefore, Duque invited a great god. Here came the problem. What kind of price did one have to pay to seduce a god who could punch the Demon King and kick the Black Dragon army? In the past, Duque had been very vexed. However, ever since a certain dragon queen awakened a certain gluttonous talent because of the ice cream, things became much simpler. This was the scene that Zul was presented with. What the hell? Queen Alexstrasza didn't care about the soup splashing on her impressive breasts. She breathed out hot air as she sent one meatball after another into her mouth. Her beautiful face looked ridiculous because of the number of meatballs under her cheeks. However, the dragon's might that she unintentionally exuded naturally frightened Zul. Almost subconsciously, it made the hellfire that did not have much wisdom stop moving. It looked like she was the one who scared hellfire so much that it didn't dare to move. Ah, guru, demons. The queen reluctantly put down her spoon and stood up a little awkwardly. Aluo guru la. You asked for it. On the other side, Duque, who was walking over with a plate of delicious food, was speechless. He held his forehead and said, "Please. Can't you eat it before you talk? The giant dragon army has lost all face because of you." The queen seemed to realize that she had lost her composure. She took a deep breath, and then with a gulp, she swallowed the more than 10 meatballs in her mouth in one gulp. Duke's face fell as he watched the egg-sized meatballs protruding out of the queen's thin neck and into her bottomless stomach before disappearing without a trace. No, it should have collapsed a long time ago. In order to tempt this glutton, after receiving the news that Zul might attack, he and the Windrunner sisters had been busy for a few hours as a chef and a waitress. They had made a few meals, but it was not enough for the queen. A dragon that weighed dozens of tons turned into the size of a human, and even its weight dropped to 100 pounds. This was not scientific. It was wishful thinking to use a human's appetite to satisfy a dragon's appetite. Well, there was no point in thinking about this. But I have carefully prepared these soup meatballs. Boo-hoo. Ugh. The queen burped, and then accidentally spat out a small amount of flames. She then gave Duque a thumbs up. Actually, meatballs are very delicious. I can even taste them in my stomach. Damn, do dragons even have taste buds in their stomachs? Turning her head, the queen was a little angry when she saw Zul's green skin. Seeing the orcs reminded her of those humiliating years. Then she looked at Hellfire, which had been included in the category of demons. As smart as the queen was, how could she not know what Duque was planning? Although I knew that you must be up to no good by suddenly inviting me to dinner, for the sake of the delicious food, I will help you kill every demon and black dragon that appears in front of me. The queen struck a domineering pose, looking majestic. Well, if she could wipe the soup off the corner of her mouth, that would be right. Unfortunately, she was just a clown now. Even so, the queen's words still made Duque happy. Damn! This was a golden medal of immunity. Wait. Not including the orcs. Duque lost his voice. The queen was dispirited. Not including the orcs. Duque was a little disappointed. He did not ask any more. The Dragon Slumber Temple was so conflicted. The laws of their guardian dragons were not something that outsiders could understand. It did not matter. This was already very good. Duque put the cutlery in his hand on the coffee table that was specially prepared for uninvited guests. He took off his apron and handed it to Sasha, who had already taken out her bow and arrows. He loosened his muscles and strode towards the chief orc warlock. Zul, right? Very well, let's fight one-on-one. Along with Duque's domineering words, an illusory dragon claw suddenly appeared in the air. With just a squeeze, the Hellfire, which was enough to make half of the human army fall into chaos and despair, turned into powder and dissipated in the wind. Zul was horrified and almost subconsciously took half a step back. Aurelia smiled bitterly and rested her chin on her hand. Duque, you little ****. You make it sound so dignified. Sasha continued, but I like that he's a little bad, but he can stand up at the critical moment and have a heroic spirit. While the Windrunner sisters were teasing, Zul was cursing in his heart. He finally understood. The so-called duel was under the premise that he could not summon any demons and fight with Duque. Damn it! Could a warlock who could not summon demons still be called a warlock? Chapter 699. Well, a duel between two people. One-on-one. It sounded fair, didn't it? In fact, it was bullsh***t. Although warlocks had the talents of demon, destruction, and pain, not allowing a warlock to have a demon pet was like letting a karate player cut off a pair of palms to play senpai. Zul's strength was at least halved. Since ancient times, warlocks had relied on hellhounds to disgust the mage to death. Hellhounds could not only provide warlocks with magic resistance, but they could also interrupt the mage's casting from time to time. Well, the hellhound that was just summoned was directly wiped out by Alexstrasza. Then, she found a void demon and tried to make the void demon give herself a magic shield. The moment the demon came out, it was also wiped out by the queen. Zul cried when he pulled the fight to such an extent. Damn, this was a fair duel? This was the so-called one-on-one. Zul was so angry that his nose was crooked. Zul also saw Duque's viciousness. What made him even more bitter was that his plan to crush Karazhan had gone down the drain. After seeing Nefarian, how could he not know that this skinny elf woman in front of him was most likely the dragon aspect, Alexstrasza? Even if she did not attack him, he would not be able to please himself. This Lich King had never been a courageous person. Grom Hellhound's roar was, "Don't be a coward, just do it." Well, Zul, more than cowardly? More than cowardly? Even the sun shrunk for you to see. Other villains would at least say some harsh words and then make a magnificent strategic retreat. Well, Zul actually did not say a word. He raised his chin, and a few of his bitter warlock brothers immediately rushed forward, swearing to die. He turned around and left without looking back, as if he had torn down your door and left without saying a word of apology. Hey! You come as you please, you leave as you please. If you rob the bride and tear down the door, at least leave a red packet. If you don't leave your life and artifact behind, don't you feel embarrassed? Duque sneered and used a large ice shield to withstand the warlock's annihilation spells, then raised his hands and made a closing gesture. It was as if a pair of invisible giant palms had appeared in the void and forcibly closed the portal that Zul had created. Creak, a teeth-aching sound stimulated everyone's eardrums. Zul's beard curled up in anger. He turned around abruptly, and the white skull paint on his face began to fall as his facial muscles trembled in anger. Duke Marcus, he yelled in the common tongue, Duke Marcus. It's true that the dragon is a powerhouse, but she's not a qualified bodyguard. Don't think that I can't kill you under her protection. Duque crooked his finger and smirked. Come. I'm not afraid of you. His hand gesture was also a signal. Almost as soon as he moved his finger, the Windrunner sisters behind him made their move. Since Zul did not care about the rules of the pugilistic world of one-on-one fights, then in a group fight, who knew who would be afraid of who? Aurelia's violent wind and thunder arrow easily hit a high-grade warlock who had lost his shield. Without the shield that the void demon had exchanged for the sacrifice, the only thing that could resist the attack was their own equipment and mortal body. They were not like Zul, who had seemingly strange but incomparably luxurious epic equipment. Warlocks who relied too much on their shields were no different from lambs waiting to be slaughtered after losing their shields that could protect them from physical attacks. The wind and thunder arrow directly exploded the head of a warlock, and even the broken part of the cervical vertebra was charred black. On the other side, Sasha's wind arrow was not as domineering as her sister's wind and thunder arrow, but when it came to killing people, its efficiency was not bad. Next to her, the heroic spirit sorcerer Khadgar had just rushed out and stabbed a warlock in the back like a thief. He suddenly found that the rest of Zul's subordinates had been killed by the Windrunner sisters. As a result, the heroic spirit warriors that rushed out from behind either ran to help the Saintess of Chastity and the Curator, or simply became spectators and retreated to a distance to cheer. If Zul's face was not covered with a thick layer of white powder, his face would have been very black. Zul was very afraid of death, but he found that when he had nowhere to retreat, he was the kind of person who would burst out with unlimited potential. Perhaps this was the human desire to live. Above his head, a huge fire cloud the size of a small villa was rolling, as if it was gathering a storm. However, this firestorm did not look like a simple gathering of elements, nor did it look like a dead object. The destructive fire elements circled around it rhythmically, like a strong beating heart in a human chest. The fire cloud absorbed the energy from the void elemental realm, and every beat was like the deep breath of a giant dragon, mixed with wind, thunder, and fire. Zul's magic staff in his right hand guided the fire cloud, and the skull of Ghoul Dan, in his left hand continued to pour even more mana into the fire cloud. Even if this fire cloud was not a dragon breath, it was still similar to the dragon breath of a dragon aspect. Oh! Seemingly aware of her rudeness, Alexstrasza finally used a handkerchief to wipe the soup off her mouth, and immediately set her eyes on Zul. A Breaking Dawn mystic already had the ability to herd a dragon aspect, and with the help of a divine artifact, this was enough to pose a threat to a dragon aspect. The queen could not help but narrow her eyes. Duque, it's fine if you want to act cool, but don't go overboard. Because the entrance to Karazhan had been changed, the battlefield was now on the huge balcony where the knight's nightmare had been near the broken staircase. At this moment, the sky above the balcony seemed to be divided into two distinct sides. On one side, there was a red curtain of destructive flames that lit up the atmosphere. When the fire cloud rolled and rolled, the high-temperature flames seemed to be able to burn through the sky of Karazhan, and even the illusory space behind them had to be ignited. The other side was illusory and blurred. Half the sky was flashing with purplish-blue arcane light, and delicate mage hands were turning from illusory to real. This process was neither fast nor slow, and people could easily see that these hands were not only holding magic staffs that everyone had seen before, but also some that they had not seen before. Does Duque have so many magic staffs? Sasha was a little confused. I don't know. I only recognize the Grand Marshal's battle staff, and the Jordan's staff. Aurelia was also confused. Today, Duque was holding the Titahak Step of Time, with 4 sharp horns. It was completely black, and the body of the staff emitted a blue and white light. And floating around him were all the magic staffs that he had sealed in the corner of his memory. Zul, Duque said softly, and then said, "This move is a special gift for you. The name of the move is very suitable for you, and that is, Unlimited Staff." Chapter 700. What was a retard? Zul was a classic example of a retard. Jaden threw out a blood contract, and he foolishly went to sign it. If he was cheated by a swindler, it could be said that he was momentarily blinded by greed. Perhaps he could win a few tears as a victim, but what about after he gained power? He actually did not want it and hid. He did not go to clean himself up and become a tribal hero like Grom, nor did he have enough ambition like Dan to go all the way to the end. Dan knelt down and came out of the mountains out of fear of death. For a guy with such a weak will, it was no wonder that he lost to Arthas in the original history. Even with the fusion of the will, it was still the idiot's will that dominated. Calling Zul a retard was letting him off easy. So to a certain extent, the unlimited staff represented Duque's disdain for him. On the other hand, it implied the importance Duque attached to Zul. Don't look at how Duque set up the Dragon's Gate and used the Foodie Queen to make Zul bleed. Unfortunately, the Queen could only help to this extent. The strength of a dragon aspect was inseparable from the iron law that it had to abide by. This was also the instinct that the Titans of creation had imprinted in the deepest part of their souls when they created them. In the end, Duque still had to rely on his own radiant moon strength to fight against the Breaking Dawn warlock Zul, who had a divine weapon. Wasn't it very difficult? If it was anywhere else outside of Karazhan, even if Duque could resurrect and run back to his corpse, he would not be able to defeat Zul even if he died 10,000 times. Zul, who held the skull of Dan, was like a nuclear power plant with sufficient fuel that could generate almost unlimited power. How could Duque, a radiant moon wizard who used a boiler to generate power, fight against Zul? Fortunately, this was Karazhan. Duque, who had successfully controlled Karazhan, was fighting against Zul with the power of the entire wizard tower. In this case, there was a new possibility. That was to forcibly exchange an exaggerated amount of quality for an opponent's. Before that, there was a prerequisite, and that was to not let Zul's pain magic extinguish first. Although curses dealt continuous damage, for someone as small as Duque, a single hit was equivalent to an instant kill. As expected, Zul was not a good person. The moment before the fire cloud was launched, Zul's left index finger flicked stealthily. Without a sound, without a trace, a pile of curses quietly flew towards Duque. If not for the system notification, Duque might really have fallen for it. The next moment, the Windrunner sisters had already retreated 100 meters away and were hiding by the door. After Duque's transformation, Karazhan was like a world for every district. Other than the simple visual and weather that were common, each district was actually in a different space. As for Duque, he had already created more than 100 copies of Duque. True mirror image, infinitely small version, the Duke standing on the spot looked like he was suffering from dozens of incurable diseases. After letting out a blood-curdling scream, he clutched his chest and fell to the ground in pain. He twitched a few times and died. If there were not more than 100 Duque watching, the Windrunner sisters hiding by the door would have been scared half to death. F***CK. He's dead. Was it poison? Was it poison in sh**T? Pfft. No matter how stupid Duque number 233 is, he wouldn't eat sh**T, right? No need to ask, it must be Zul. Yes. Despicable and shameless. Zul was stunned. He almost thought that he had fallen for an illusion. He was not a country bumpkin who had never seen illusion spells, nor had he never seen the Sword Saint's mirror image spell. However, to his knowledge, even though the mirror image spell was extremely lifelike, it was still a few images that were exactly the same as the real person. They had no physical body and would not leave footprints on the ground. They could only deceive enemies who were slow and had poor dynamic vision. When had he ever seen such a lifelike mirror image that looked exactly like a real person? No, this was no longer a mirror image. This was simply a clone. It was like a clone with an independent personality. Not to mention Zul, even Khadgar who had lived for more than 10 years, Windsor who had lived for more than 1,000 years, Aurelia who had lived for more than 3,000 years, and Alexstrasza who had lived for more than 20,000 years were stunned when they saw this scene. That's right. These were not simple clones. These were the scolding clones that Duque had recorded a lot of dialogue and actions in the system. Duke's doppelgangers scattered in all directions. They even flew into the sky and pointed at Zul as if they were poking him in the face and spitting at him. I hate shameless and cowardly people like you the most. It's really bad luck for the tribe to let you be the great chief. Do you really think you can escape with the Book of Mediv? Idiot, have you forgotten the blood contract you signed with Kill Jaden? Retard. Even if you run to the ends of the universe, Kill Jaden will still find you. Zul's body trembled like a sieve. He never thought that these top-secret things would be known by Duque. These words that struck his heart were like a nightmare to him, who was already mentally fragile. Not to mention that there were more than 100 Duque scolding him at the same time, creating a shocking atmosphere of being condemned by thousands of people. Duque, who had used the invisibility spell to hide behind Alexstrasza, sneered. Bumpkin Zul. Have you never seen how the celestial scolding clones destroy a good young man? Then you should see it for yourself. The foodie queen tilted her head and looked at the invisible Duque with a surprised expression. Duque blinked. Of course, he did not expect to hide from the Red Dragon Queen, whose senses were so sensitive that they exploded. The queen said, I suddenly realized that you can actually be quite mean sometimes. Duque used the moral integrity that Archbishop Fao had passed on to him and replied in a holy manner, is that so? I only use bastard tactics on bastards. Aurelia said. Sister, should we consider changing men? Sasha said. Let's observe for a while. On the other side, seeing that the scolding was almost over, the Duque suddenly made a move. Together with the staff of the magician's hand in the sky, countless different kinds of magic blasted out. Scorch, Shockwave, Flame Blast, Frost Arrow, Arcane Impact, Arcane Missile. In addition to these, there were also elemental attacks similar to the shaman's power of wind and thunder. Zul was completely stunned. If it was a single element, he could still use the corresponding element and use his higher and more concentrated magic to bully Duque. High-level mystery could easily defeat low-level mystery. But these magic attacks seemed to be irregular, but they could very well tear and destroy the elements he had gathered. Zul had to wrap his body in fire clouds as a certain degree of protection. Chapter 701. With the addition of the skull of Ghul Dan, Zul's amazing magic power was being forcefully worn down by these different elemental powers. There was no blood and flesh splattering. There was no soul dispersing. This method of using pure skill and extraordinary control to make up for the lack of magic power level was different even in the eyes of a super being like Alexstrasza, who had lived for more than 20,000 years. The higher the level of power, the easier it was to defeat everything. This method of fighting the strong with the weak and striving for victory was more thrilling than any battle of the same level. Zul had the quality, and Duque had the quantity with the support of the wizard tower. They were like millstones that consumed each other. Especially when the breaking dawn dark power on the surface of Zul's fire cloud was worn down, revealing the purer and darker divine power of the skull of Ghoul Dan, Duque's magic power consumption immediately skyrocketed. Only Duque could think of and dare to do a radiant moon against a divine. Even Alexstrasza was tongue-tied. In order not to expose the invisible Duque behind her, she could only sigh. Duque, how dare you? Duque flattered the dragon. Don't I still have you? I won't do anything. What if this beastman scum attacks you first? At this point, if the Red Dragon Queen still did not know what Duque was up to, then she was a queen for nothing. Alright, if she was in the middle of a fierce battle and met a troublesome teammate who lured the monster over, then this was a grudge. If he asked before drawing the monster, then that was respect. Yes, the Red Dragon Army, who abided by the Iron Law, was strictly forbidden from attacking ordinary intelligent beings, but the Iron Law did not say that one could not fight back when attacked by ordinary intelligent beings. The Queen was still thinking about why Duque had been so humble and eager to learn, asking her for the laws of the Dragon Slumber Temple. Of course, the Queen did not mind. It was something that had been publicized in the Dragon Slumber Temple for a long time anyway. Now that she thought about it, it seemed that Duque had been studying the loopholes in the law. Alexstrasza was also speechless. Hey. Are you trying to take advantage of me? This meal of yours is really expensive. No. You don't have the heart to let me, a top chef who's so kind, so righteous, and so passionate about the world of Azeroth, perish just like that, right? Duque acted shamelessly. It was obvious that she was threatening him with a long-term meal ticket. Oh, no, it was seduction. The Windrunner sisters were also snickering. This was the different way of doing things brought about by different perspectives. The dragon race abided by the rules. They looked at the iron rules all day and thought about what they could not do. Duke, a modern man, was like a cunning lawyer in the modern world. His way of thinking was that as long as it was not forbidden, he would do it. Moreover, the punishment was not severe. As long as there was enough profit, he would do it. That's right. Duque was instigating and leading Alexstrasza astray. Of course, she knew that the orc warlock in front of her, who was filled with evil energy, was not a good person. However, adding a new race as an enemy required the unanimous approval of the Dragon King's Council. However, Duque had opened a new window for her. She was also hesitant. She did not know if this was the beginning of some kind of depravity. After all, many times the devil tempted people to commit crimes. It was also a small mistake, starting from small principles, and then slowly sinking. Duque saw her hesitation. This is just an insurance. I never thought of forcing you to violate the principles of the Dragon Slumber Temple. Even if you don't do anything, I still have a 60% chance of taking care of Zul. Duque did not force the Queen to make a choice immediately because Duque also realized that it was likely to involve the high issue of conscience. The people in the Azeroth Justice Camp were still very mindful of their conscience. It was true that Duque wanted to borrow the Queen's power, but if he did not do it well and the Red Dragon Queen violated the original history and really fell, it would not be fun. Did they not see how fierce Arthas, who was originally a paladin, once fell into the Death Knight? On the other side, the fierce battle had also entered a white-hot stage. The air of the platform was filled with a nauseating pungent smell. The smell was more destructive than the dragon's breath, stimulating the sense of smell and taste of every creature present. On one side, there were hell-like flames, and on the other side, there was a gorgeous magic attack like a grand fireworks show. When the two different scenes intersected in mid-air, there was a huge dividing line in the center, like a crack in space. This was not a simple optical illusion. This bright belt of light was slowly pressing towards Zul, and at the same time, constantly devouring Zul's scattered magic power, gradually cutting off the connection between Zul and the fire elemental realm. This is impossible. Zul was so shocked that the muscles on his face trembled violently, causing the white powder on his face to fall in large chunks, revealing half of his face that was more horrible than an old witch's makeup. This could not go on. Zul's timid nature had determined that he was never a person who would fight fiercely. He was more willing to see the enemy play their cards and then kill them in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, now, he had observed for a long time and did not find any flaws in Duque. Every Duque seemed to be real. They drew magic power from different places and then transformed it into magic attacks. Compared to an illusion, Zul was more willing to believe that these were true avatars of Duque's soul that had been cut into countless pieces, and at the same time, held a part of Duque's power and soul. Come, judgment of destruction. Suddenly, more than 90% of the volume of the fire cloud wrapped around Zul, and the next moment, the cloud of fire exploded. It was as if someone had thrown 1,000,000 grenades into the air and exploded them. The eyes were full of splashing flames, and these rockets filled every corner of the air. Within a radius of 100 meters, there was no room for anyone to dodge. Countless Duque's ice shields were broken. Except for those Duque who had time to open the ice barrier, most of the Duques screamed and fell, and then turned into illusory magic dust. Aurelia, who was hiding behind the door with only half of her head poking out, was stunned. If the real Duque was not secretly hugging her third sister's waist and winking at her from the other side of the door, she might really have been scared out of her wits. Suddenly, she felt that the mage had ice block, the thief had cloak, and the knight had invincibility. These three professions were all F***king gangsters. At this time, a Duque appeared triumphantly, and then the moment he appeared, he was hit by 20 curses, and died in a second. Duque bared his teeth. Fortunately, he did not go out to show off, or else he would not know which curse he died from. Damn, according to Luo's words, this was a big move, right? After a big move, there was still such combat power? He really deserved to be called the first Lich King. Chapter 702. In the past, when he played games, Duque never understood why bosses often had several stages. Now that he thought about it, it should be because every strong boss had their own trump card that could turn the tables. There was no such thing as defeating the world with one move. He used Alexstrasza to destroy Zul's demonic sea and used the system elf to control the doppelgangers to continuously deplete Zul's mana. That was not enough. Zul must have another trump card. Duque did not want to let Zul go, so he could only play the game by himself. If he was alone, of course, he could play infinite corpse dragging. Unfortunately, such a big thing could not be hidden from the people around him. He could use safety as a reason to send Jaina and Ronan to Stormwind City. After giving Wuxia a slot for eternal life, he temporarily sent her away, but he could not send the Windrunner sisters away. To be able to fight side by side with him was the advantage of having a female hero as a partner. On the other hand, this was also a restraint. Because last time, when Aurelia was not there, Duque had to drag his dying body to save the Red Dragon Queen. This had already made Aurelia regret for a long time, and this time, she was not willing to let Duque face Zul alone. Since Zul dared to step on the scene without bringing a few powerful chieftains, and he even acted like a boss with his nose in the air, Duke naturally wouldn't be polite to him. It's time. Let's go. Duque sent a magic message, and on the other side of the huge platform, another door was suddenly kicked open. Two golden figures dashed out. They were two paladins riding spirit warhorses, Tyrion Fordring and Gavin Rad Doom. According to the original plan, Duque wanted to capture all the Silver Four Sages except Turalyon to work for him. However, his relationship with Tyrrhenas was no longer the same as before. He had extorted 10 million gold coins from Tyrrhenas, and now Tyrrhenas was asking for Theon. Even though Duke was dealing with the great chief of the Horde, Tyrrhenas still hesitated for a long time before letting Theon go. The Lordaeron king's excuse was also very dignified. The tribe's #1 warrior, Hellscream, was here, and only Migraine could not hold him off. Hence, he had to leave Uther and Sai-Dan behind. The Dalajan had just lost another Kirin Tor counselor, and now they were unwilling to send anyone out. That was the only way. That was why Duque's side could only arrange a deformed party of 5, 2 paladins, 2 rangers, and a mage. If this was in the game, it would be a terrible configuration. However, the 5 people who stepped into the hero domain were all powerful people who were proficient in 3 types of talents. Don't look at how the 2 paladins swung their hammers and attacked. In reality, they were monsters who could fight, tank, and heal. This time, the white foundation on Zul's ugly face finally changed. Aradutta. There was a vague incantation from his mouth, and then a curse that was completely invisible to others flew out. It looked like it would hit Tyrion in less than half a second. In that split second, a duke magically appeared in front of Theon and took the curse. Then, with a stretch of his legs, he fell to the ground and died. Tyrion was not blind. Of course, he knew that Duque's clone had saved his life. However, as a paladin second only to Uther, Tyrion's psychological quality was also superb. There was no change in his resolute face. He waved the huge shining golden warhammer, ignoring the fire snakes around Zul, activated his invincibility, and hit Zul head-on. Over 10,000 degrees Celsius of flames washed over the golden barrier of light that Theon had condensed with holy light, emitting a piercing crackling sound unique to the raging flames. This was a duel between magic and holy light. It was also the ultimate duel between destruction and protection. For a moment, Theon thought he couldn't hold on any longer. However, the golden light on his equipment supported him. It was the paladin equipment he had obtained from Karazhan. It was equipment that even his good friends Sai-Dan and Turalyon had been envious of for a long time. As one of the 5 silver saints, the belief in the holy light was an important factor, but equipment was also a part of strength. A large cluster of frost arrows shot out just in time, temporarily suppressing Zul's raging flames. In the name of the holy light, I will punish you. A golden hammer descended from the sky, approaching Zul's head at high speed. Zul did not know about the paladin's skills, but in his heart, he predicted the arrival of the final judgment. No. Unable to hold back anymore, Zul hardened his heart and activated the ivory eagle necklace around his neck. The giant beast's teeth, which had been refined with the power of shamans and then reinfused with the power of evil demons, had unimaginable defensive abilities. In a single breath, a total of 7 mysterious barriers appeared. At this moment, the storm of arrows from the Windrunner sisters arrived. Swoosh 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 swoosh. 3 sets of 21 arrows in a row, forcing Zul to quickly adjust the structure of the shield. From protection against blunt weapons to arrow protection and elemental protection. Gavin Rad's heavy hammer also arrived. Damn it! As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. It was unreasonable to have more people fighting against fewer people. If any one of them came alone, Zul, who was once a shaman and was proficient in all types of magic and close combat, had 100 ways to kill any one of them. But with several different types of strong enemies attacking together, Zul was a bit distracted. Poof! It was like a bubble popping, and then at least 5 layers of Zul's shields were broken. This was not the end. A Duque appeared behind Zul. This avatar, which had condensed a lot of Duque's magic, made a set of attacks that Zul did not expect. Strictly speaking, it was not even known if this was magic. It was a palm that was very similar to a horse stance punch. The palm pushed out horizontally, and even Thean, who was separated by Zul, felt the fierce wind. Bigby's impact palm, this strange move, which was completely different from the existing Azeroth spell system, made Zul very uncomfortable. When he was defending, he made a half-second mistake. In the state of the opponent's group attack, this was undoubtedly quite fatal. Zul, who had been standing motionless like a towering mountain, staggered forward after being hit. Gavin Rad launched a sneaky attack from the bottom up. Although it still could not break all of Zul's shields, it made Zul temporarily lose the ability to cast spells. Not good. Zul's heart skipped a beat. Chapter 703. It was as if they had practiced it countless times. After the clone was killed by Zul's curse, the 3 new dukes used Bigby's grappling palm, Bigby's diamond fist, and Bigby's crushing palm on Zul. In the eyes of the onlookers, Zul was beaten up by a monk, a new profession that had yet to appear in the Eastern Kingdom. A palm strike caused Zul to lose his center of gravity, and Gavin Rad sent him flying with a hammer. Then, Duke number 2 followed up with a grappling hold and grabbed him again. Then, he used his fist, which was as big as a water tank and had a high concentration of magic power, to add a heavy blow at close range. Finally, he used the stance of the rising dragon fist to hit Zul's chin. A series of actions were completed in the time it takes for a spark to fly off a flint. When Zul was sent flying, everyone was shocked to discover that Duke's doppelganger's rising dragon palm had sent Zul right towards the giant hammer that was descending from the sky. Ultimate holy verdict. Bang! It was an earth-shattering sound. Even through clothes, skin, and muscles, everyone could clearly see that Thean's holy light had completely penetrated Zul's body, from the top of his head to the soles of his feet. Woo! Zul did not even scream. He opened his hideous mouth full of fangs, but not a single word came out. It was done. Everyone knew the importance of magic circuits to a spell-type professional. After encountering the Orc Warlock for the first time in the first year of the Dark Portal, the Dalajan mages waited impatiently for a long time before they successfully obtained an Orc Warlock's corpse. After dissecting it, they concluded that Orc Warlocks, like humans and elves, all had magic circuits. Since the structure was the same, then Thean's holy light penetrated Zul's body and killed his chance of survival. What would happen to a mage's magic circuit when holy light, which did not belong to the natural elemental domain, wantonly rushed into it? The consequence was a state of being unable to cast spells, even more serious than silence. No one knew how many magic circuits Zul had, but it was obvious that the circuits with the spine as the central axis had all collapsed under the impact of the ultra-high purity of the holy light. Perhaps there would be other smaller magic circuits. The main circuit had definitely collapsed. Gavin Rad swung his hammer again. This was not an ordinary holy light attack, but a fatal strike with the power of lightning. Yes, strike while he's down. After hanging out with Duque for so long, Gavin Rad had become a little corrupted. At this moment, the tusk ornaments on Zul's waist suddenly shattered. A few black shadows suddenly jumped out and shot towards the 2 paladins and the 2 rangers. Group Death Coil. Death Coil could be said to be a warlock's life-saving move. As long as one was hit, not only would they lose control of their body due to fear and fall into a state of paralysis, the powerful dark energy could also forcibly convert 20% of the damage into the warlock's vitality. This was not just one shot, but 4 shots of death coil. Most importantly, an inanimate object would not be able to trigger death coil. It was conceivable that if the vitality of all 4 heroes was absorbed at the same time, Zul would definitely recover in an instant. At this critical moment, the movements of the 4 guys were surprisingly consistent. Their empty left hands directly fled to their waist pouches and threw a white fluffy thing towards the death coil that looked like a black skull. Squeak! The small animals screamed at the same time, causing Zul's face to turn pale. All that was left was despair. Death coil had indeed hit, but unfortunately, it had hit the little white mouse that had been prepared in advance. The pitiful scapegoat turned into a dried rat as soon as his legs touched the ground, and he fell from the sky. Zul's heart was the same as these little guys, falling from mid-air into the abyss of despair. Even this was predicted. Unwilling. 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 Zul had never thought that a good time to trample on the field would turn into him stepping into his grave like an idiot. What's going on? Did Nefarian not have good intentions from the start to send me to my death? How did he know that I would definitely not be able to defeat the people of Karazhan? Or did he predict the existence of the Red Dragon Queen? I don't understand. I don't understand. So what if I don't understand? Too late. Too late. I won't give him a chance to turn the tables. The incomparably powerful wild arrow had arrived. They perfectly bypassed the 2 paladins beside Zul and hit where they wanted to hit. Like a target that had been nailed to a target, Zul was hit by more than 30 arrows in the blink of an eye. His whole body was nailed to the solid granite ground by a steel arrow that was more than half a meter long. This was not the end. The 2 paladins directly hammered down. Bang! 2 dull hammered down at the same time, making a sound as if it had been a single hit. After a short period of paralysis, Zul clearly felt that his right shoulder and right lung had completely collapsed. As for the abdomen that was hit by the heavy hammer, there was a hole on the left side of his waist. His intestines were squeezed out of the wound as if they were escaping. No, the blood and lung debris that came out of his lungs quickly filled Zul's throat. He could not even say half a word. However, a mystic did not necessarily need words to activate magic. In his mind that had not completely collapsed, Zul said a few words: the dark portal. Save me. An accident that Duque absolutely did not want to see happened. The last sound that came out of Zul's heart turned into a distant cry. It was not a cry of a human, a cry that was not a living thing. It was a cry at the level of the soul. However, it caused a reaction from the dark portal in the faraway cursed land. Rustle, rustle, rustle. In the cursed land, every orc that was camped along the south side of the dark portal ran out of their tents in horror because they felt the vibration from the dark portal. The chiefs looked at the pillars on both sides of the dark portal in astonishment. The huge statue of the mage holding the sword was actually trembling slightly. On the ground, the red gravel rose and fell like waves. Everything seemed to be foreboding something. All of a sudden, the door of darkness in the cursed land closed, and the tribe that was trapped there lost all the support from Draenor in an instant. The orcs cried out in shock. The one who could not accept this fact was Duque. He opened his red eyes wide and watched as a huge all-like unknown object pierced the sky above the platform. A deep spatial passage that looked like a black hole opened in an instant. The dark portal responded to Zul's call and was using its incomparably brutal power to try to pull Zul back from the space of Karazhan. Chapter 704. It was never easy to open a stable portal in a complicated place filled with all kinds of spatial rifts. The door of darkness had done it with its boundless and unparalleled might. Amidst the strange sound of glass breaking, the scene of the void was divided into countless pieces, constantly tumbling. Mortals who could not see the mystery of space were completely confused at this moment. For example, Gavin Rad saw that one of his hands was growing on his thigh. Everyone was shocked, except Duque. "Stand down." Duque's shout made everyone find their backbone again. The invincible effect caused by the holy light could resist the turbulence of space? Stop kidding. Holy Shield could block the damage of the space fragments, so it would not be called Holy Shield, but Cosmic Invincibility. A pair of mages' hands pulled the shoulder armor of the two paladins back. Immediately, the two paladins took advantage of the force, kicked their legs at the same time, and directly dodged the space fragments that were just a few centimeters away. Ha ha ha. Zul coughed up blood while laughing wildly. He was afraid of death, so how could he not have a backup plan? The dark portal was his backup plan. That's right, the dark portal itself was a dead thing, and it did not have its own will. However, when Zul attached the soul fragments he collected when killing his enemies to the dark portal, even if they were thousands of miles away, he could still control the dark portal to perform the same action as the warlock's summoning ritual. The only thing that Zul miscalculated was the attack power of Duque and the fact that he could not summon demons. Zul laughed wildly, but his heart was cold after surviving a disaster. The strong of the alliance was really not something that the tribe could deal with. At this moment, Zul's body had begun to become illusory. It seemed that in 3 seconds, he would be able to complete the teleportation. At this time, the light of Flash suddenly lit up in front of Zul. Replacing the two paladins who flew back was Duque's figure in a blue and white mage's robe. If Duque looked like a mage now, then Duque was definitely a melee mage. Under the scanning of the system elf, he saw every piece of space fragment that was spinning in the void. Then, like a spear, he suddenly lunged forward in a horse stance, thrusting out the Titahark step of time in his hand. The trident-shaped black spearhead pierced into Zul's illusory abdomen without any hindrance. Then, it opened fire. Originally, the hundreds of arcane missiles that poured out from Duque's magic staff could not hit Zul. Strictly speaking, Zul's body had begun to disappear from this dimension. If it were any other mage, they would not be able to do anything about it. Not Antonidas. Not an Astrian. Perhaps the Mediv of the past could do it, but unfortunately, the Mediv had already become the dust of history, at least for the time being. Zul was unlucky. He had encountered the even more bizarre Duque. Duque did not have the destructive power to destroy the world, nor did he have the supreme magic power of ultra-high purity. But in terms of control and precision, Duque was definitely the best in the world. The dark portal was just a dead object. It would only instinctively follow the instructions of the soul fragment and teleport creatures in the specified space dimension. The basis of teleportation was to set the coordinates of the starting point and destination. If either one was messed up, then it was likely to be teleported to the void or a spatial crack. Duque could not stop the teleportation of such a high-level divine object like the dark portal, but it did not mean that Duque could not do anything about it. What he did was to control Karazhan and slightly change the coordinates of the surrounding space dimension. Yes, if you want to teleport 10086, then I give you 9527, then you will definitely be in a mess. To completely teleport a person away, it seemed to be an instant, but in fact, it had to scan the entire body at least 100 times every second. Otherwise, if there was any error, even if the teleportation was successful, it would be a pile of meat paste. What Duque destroyed was this process. It looked like an arcane missile attack, but in fact, each shot contained a chaotic space coordinate. He was interfering with the judgment of the dark portal. Ah! What did you do? No! 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 Zul screamed, but he could not stop the dark portal from stopping the teleportation process for his safety. Under the surprised gaze of everyone, the turbulence in space stopped, and Zul's body quickly solidified from an illusory state. No, no, no! The dark portal, you idiot! Teleport me away! Zul was still calling out to the dark portal through the soul fragment. However, in a place like Karazhan, where space was unstable, teleportation was not so easy. According to the feedback from the system, it seemed that at the dark portal in Draenor, the warlock that Zul had left behind was hurriedly performing a second summoning ritual in an attempt to pull Zul back. However, under the control of Duque, Zul could only be like a fish out of water, struggling futilely on the cold floor. Now, because of the collapse of the Master's will, the two huge nightmare creatures that Zul had summoned had been dealt with by the Virgin Mary and the Curator. Everyone began to gather around to see how Duque would deal with the third chief of the tribe. Duque snapped his fingers, and an illusory mirror image appeared beside everyone. It was a magic message. The big shots of the Alliance, who had been nervously waiting for the outcome of the decisive battle in Karazhan in the Overwatch Fortress, the Riedridge Mountain Fortress, the Dalajan, the capital of Lordaeron, and the palaces of the various kingdoms, all breathed a sigh of relief when they saw Zul twitching on the ground like a dying old dog. Ha ha ha! We won! I knew Duque could do it. Anduin Lothar was the first to raise his fists high. Good job, Duque. In the Riedridge Mountain, King Lang jumped up. Damn it, my old face. In the Dalajan, King Antonidas touched his red face. Duque again. In Lordaeron, Terinas had mixed feelings. The reactions of the kings were slightly different. However, in the Overwatch Fortress at the front line against the Horde, the entire Alliance army suddenly burst into thunderous cheers. Long live Saint Duke Marcus! Ha ha ha! Another great chief! I knew that Lord Marcus would not let us down. Duque's holy name had become sacred, and was once again praised by countless soldiers. Facing the Horde again, even the bravest soldiers could not help but feel uneasy. However, when the two sides were confronting each other, there was suddenly news that Duque had defeated the chief of the Horde. This news undoubtedly strengthened every Alliance warrior's confidence in the Alliance's victory. Chapter 705. On the other hand, the Horde was doomed to wail. In order to destroy the Beastman's morale, the Alliance cleverly broadcasted the magic image to the Horde. In the Cursed Lands, the morale of the main force of the Horde was low because they could not attack and were trapped in the Cursed Lands. Now that their path of retreat was suddenly cut off, coupled with the news that their chief had been defeated, panic spread through the entire camp. No! This must be the Alliance's scheme. The Alliance made a fake image to fool us. The former shamans, who were now orc warlocks, ran around to boost the morale of the Horde. Unfortunately, there was almost no effect. The main force of the Horde this time was made up of Kilrog Deadeye's Bloodring clan and Kargath Bladefist's Shattering Palm clan. These two clans that returned from the battlefield could be said to be the strongest in the Horde in terms of combat power. Even the Thunder God, Thunderblade, Mocking Skull, Crimson Walker and Chomping Bone clans could not be compared to these two clans. Whether it was the quality of individual soldiers or group battles, they were far inferior. Just as the Thunder God clans tried to find a sense of security from the Bloodring and Shattering Palm clans, they discovered that the beastmen of these clans were even worse off than them. The warmongers of the Shattering Palm clan lowered their heads, not saying a word. The elite warriors of the Bloodring clan knelt on the ground and cried. Ancestor! It's that demon again. Duke Marcus, it's not enough that you killed the Blackhand chief and defeated the Orgrim chief. Do you still want to kill our third chief? It's over. It's over. We can't defeat that Duque. The Thunder God and Thunder Blade clans could only reign supreme after the publicly acknowledged strongest clans were gone. After all, it had only been 2 years. Most of them had not forgotten the glory of the Blackrock and Warsong clans. Now, through word of mouth, they knew that Duke Marcus was the super demon who wiped out the Blackrock clan, chased the Warsong clan into a ravine, and killed and captured 2 chiefs. Looking at the dead dog like Zul in the huge mirror, the morale of the orcs completely collapsed. The news of the orcs falling into chaos quickly spread to the watchtower. This is a good chance. Let us defeat the horde in one go. Let our Lightning Tank Legion take the lead. Muradin Bronzebeard danced with excitement. The little man could not wait to recreate the glory of the Scorching Gorge. Sure. Taking advantage of the chaos to kill the enemy was a judgment that every qualified commander must have. Anduin made the decision on the spot. Wait. He couldn't use all of them. The dark portal is a little dangerous, Duque called out to Lothar through the magic transmission. Danger? But fighter jets. Duque, give me a convincing reason. The opportunity was fleeting, and Anduin could not let go of such a great opportunity. So what if the Door of Darkness was restored? As long as they could heavily injure the elites of the tribe who were trapped here, they would definitely be able to deal a blow to the tribe's morale. Duque thought for a moment and gave a plausible reason. Zul can remotely control the dark portal, and I have yet to remove his soul control. The mana contained in the Gate of Darkness is too powerful. I'm afraid that it'll be dangerous. You can't use everything you have. After that, it seemed that the magic communication was interrupted by some kind of spatial interference, and the communication was cut off. What happened? Muradin asked. It's not a big deal. Karazhan is located above an unstable crack in space, and it's common for magic communication to fail. In the past, it was very difficult for us to Mediv, and we often had to send people directly to them. In the past, when it was the worst, Karazhan had to seal the tower directly because of the fluctuations in space. It's not unusual for us to be unable to contact Karazhan for a year or 2. Anduin was telling the truth. Since he was the commander-in-chief, they didn't ask any further. However, when they were ready to attack, there was a disagreement. When everyone saw Anduin put on his helmet and looked like he was going to fight, they were indignant. Please, Sir Lothar, you're the commander. It's not the Battle of the Scorching Canyon now, and the front and center formations have collapsed. Why do we need the commander to go directly? The old General Haas smiled and stopped Lothar. Turalian also advised seriously, if we need the commander to go personally to defeat the enemies of chaos, wouldn't it seem that we generals are too incompetent? Yes, yes. Commander, you have enough meritorious service, let us young people get some credit. Ha ha ha. Muradin, the damned dwarf, also joined in. Anduin's face darkened. Muradin, come out. The others can call themselves young, but Muradin, you old bastard, you're almost 100 years old, and you still have the nerve to act young in front of me. Among the dwarves, Muradin was just a young man, and he did not have the slightest self-awareness of an elder. Remembering that he was a great-grandfather among the humans, he immediately shrunk his head. Okay, I admit my mistake. Seeing that everyone was not going to let him go, Anduin had no choice but to comply. Turalian, lead 1,000 cavalry to flank the east, and Haas, lead the Eagle Knights to flank the west. Both sides are probing attacks. If the orcs are not panicking, then don't rush. Muradin, cover the fire. Turalian and Haas saluted at the same time. Yes, sir. Only Muradin was extremely depressed. His dream of charging the tanks was temporarily ruined. In various places, the Alliance launched a counterattack. In the Red Ridge Mountains, Reginald led Duque's private troops out of the fortress and launched an attack on the Black Tooth clan. The Black Hand brothers were killed until they cried for their parents. Tirisful Woodlands, Briar. While Wother and Grom were fighting fiercely, Mograine led the army to launch a counterattack, vowing to destroy the entire Warsong clan here. It was conceivable that in a short time, news of victory would come from all fronts. No one would have thought that Duque would encounter such a huge problem. It was true that Duque and the others had beaten Zol like a dog, but when they were dealing with him, something strange happened. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Don't come over. The great chief of the third generation was actually so afraid of death that he was inferior to a little orc girl. At this moment, even the two paladins, Gavin Rad and Theon, had a look of disdain. The joy of defeating such a great chief was incomparable to Lothar killing the Black Hand and Turalian taking down Orgrim. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Zol struggled to get his injured body as far away from the great devil Duque as possible. Duque sneered. We won't kill you. We will only imprison you, no. I don't believe you, you devil who murdered millions of orcs. Chapter 706. Puff. Duque was speechless when the Warlock King, who used demonic powers, said that he was a demon. Just as Duque was about to do something, Zol's words made Duque's heart almost jump out of his chest. No. I don't want to die. Kill Jaden. Save me for a moment. Darkness enveloped the entire space. A gloomy voice echoed around Duque and the others. Save you? Of course, I will, in the way of the Burning Legion. Kill, Jaden sneered. Demon Commander. Alexstrasza couldn't help it this time. She strode out and stood beside Duque. Come out. Scum of the Burning Legion, let us have a good fight. On the other side, Duque gritted his teeth. He wasn't sure. In the original history, Zol was the last to seek death, and was teleported to an unknown void before he was caught by Kill, Jaden. Why did this evil god come out now? Kill, Jaden spoke again, fight. Ha ha ha. I don't have time to care about you, little Azeroth lizard. However, since my poor contestant is chanting my holy name, wouldn't I be letting down my title of Deceiver if I don't do anything? Heh heh heh. Deceiver? Yes. Demon Lord Kill, Jaden was a member of the highest class in Eredar. His evil was as chilling as his power. His status was like Sargeras 25,000 years ago. The most powerful warrior of the Titan race was selected by the Titans. Like Archimonde, he was one of Sargeras' left and right hands. Kill, Jaden enslaved the Dreadlord race and their king, Tichondrius, and made them swear to follow him, secretly take care of all kinds of matters for him, and assimilate any other potential race into the Burning Legion. Every world that was invaded by the Legion was left with only flames and ashes. The Legion led by Archimonde was invincible, and its scale and destructive power were unparalleled. All of this was inseparable from Kill, Jaden's wisdom and strategy. He was a disguise master that left a deep impression on people. He used all kinds of different appearances to get in touch with every race he wanted to conquer. Let's not talk about the faraway ones. Right in front of him was the Draenei, who he had transformed into Zol's wife and tricked the orcs into attacking the remnants of the prophet Velen who had betrayed the entire Eredar race. In the game, Duque only felt that Archimonde the Defiler and Kill, Jaden the Trickster were big bosses that were difficult to defeat. But in reality, even a transmigrator like Duque couldn't help but be amazed by the Trickster's ever-changing tricks. Kill, Jaden rarely mentioned his own name, but when he did, Duque shuddered. System Elf. Scan all the surrounding data. I want to capture any fluctuations. Understood, host. After scanning for less than a third of a second, Duque finally knew what Kill Jaden's trump card was: Ghoul Dan's skull. Under a thick layer of shielding spells, Ghoul Dan's skull was reacting in a way that no one could understand other than Duque. At this moment, Duque finally understood why a mere demigod like Ghoul Dan's skull could become a god-level magic weapon. This damned skull contained the power of the fallen titan, Sargeras. Right now, an earth-shattering explosion was brewing inside the skull. This was no different from using Sargeras's corpse to play corpse explosion. Duque couldn't imagine how powerful this explosion would be. Looking at the power data determined by the system, Duque was willing to bet that apart from Alexstrasza, no one here would survive. Even if Duque activated the entire Karazhan defense system, it wouldn't be able to withstand it. F***ck. So Zul had attacked Karazhan to deliver a nuclear bomb. I've been tricked. Time seemed to freeze. Everything around him seemed to slow down countless times in that instant. Tyrion Fordering's face was filled with nervousness. His arms holding the two-handed war hammer swelled up until the armors creaked. Gavin Rad stood in front of Duke and took out an epic-ranked shield from his storage space. He also changed his hammer to a one-handed hammer. The Windrunner sisters pulled their bowstrings and stood back to back, approaching Duque with small steps. Aurelia's lively eyes moved quickly, as if she wanted to find Kill Jaden hiding in the void. Sasha glanced worriedly at Duque from time to time. Only Alexstrasza had her hands on her hips, proudly looking around with a domineering gaze. As long as the commander of the Burning Legion dared to come out, she would immediately beat him up. Apart from Duque, no one knew that Kill Jaden would not appear at all. At this moment, Duque thought of countless ways, but it was not that simple. They were like unlucky people who had swallowed poisonous grass. Even the venom had seeped into their blood vessels. It was not something that could be spat out just by washing their stomachs. At this critical moment, Duque suddenly glanced at Zul, who looked like he was dead. Several fangs were emitting a faint red soul glow. Yes. I got it. Didn't the dark portal want to save Zul? If you want it, I'll give it to you. In the blink of an eye, dozens of Duque's doppelgangers appeared. They made various movements. This time, not only did they disturb their own people, but even Kill Jaden, who was peeping at Duque and the others through Zul's soul, was confused. Only one of Duke's doppelgangers rushed to Zul's side and kicked Zul, who was still holding the skull of Ghoul Dan in his hand. The doppelganger kicked Zul's stomach. Ah! The third great chieftain screamed, and his whole body flew up. In the next moment, the void behind him suddenly opened, and a dark portal with a ferocious snake-shaped sculpture on the door beam appeared in front of everyone. Duque? The queen was very surprised. Wasn't Karazhan's dimension controlled by Duque? Duque did not answer. He let the dark portal swallow Zul, who was like a dead dog. He even let one of his doppelgangers stand in front of Alexstrasza. Impossible. In the void, Kill Jaden's cry of surprise finally came. The enemy's fear, I'm glad. Even though everyone still did not understand what had happened, for Kill Jaden to be so frightened, it could only mean that Duque had made the right choice. Go back. Duque's main body grabbed one of the Windrunner sisters' arms with his left and right hands, and directly dragged the two sisters back. At the same time, he used Flash. Something that could make Duque scream so heartbreakingly must be very serious. After less than a tenth of a second, it was the more agile sisters who used Flash to drag Duque into the gate of Karazhan. The queen followed with the two holy knights. Almost at the moment when the door to the balcony was closed, an unparalleled loud roar came. Chapter 707. Karazhan was a magical place. This extraordinary wizard tower built on a spatial crack had the ability to protect space that most wizard towers in the world did not have because of the geographical advantage. Aurelia had personally tried shooting arrows into the open door from outside the platform. The door was obviously empty, but the arrows would naturally bounce off when they hit the door. This was because the inner layer of the door and the platform seemed to be connected, but in fact, they were not the same space. Even in Karazhan, the moment the door closed, it still felt a huge shock from space. The vibration of the spatial laws destroyed most of the balcony in an instant. In Duque's mind, there was a three-dimensional model of the situation in Karazhan. In the display, Duque clearly saw that a granite boulder weighing more than 10 tons was picked up by an invisible supergiant and floated in the air. It did not crack, nor did it shatter. Instead, it was directly swallowed by the void. There was no terrifying shockwave like a big explosion, but a large area of space collapsed as if it was swallowed by a black hole. Teleport. For most wizards, teleporting when space was unstable was courting death. However, under the system's calculations, Duque grasped the only stable millisecond and directly teleported himself and his companions to the highest floor of the wizard tower. Even the Red Dragon Queen couldn't help but take a few more glances at Duque at such exquisite control. Even Aurelia, who was used to seeing big scenes, paled a little. Explosion? What happened? Can you withstand it? Duque gritted his teeth. It's okay, at most 1/3 of Karazhan will collapse. Duque's face was darker than the bottom of a pot. If he had not kicked Zul back into the dark portal, it would have been the entire Karazhan that had been blown up. That bastard kill Jaden, what AF * king scheme. Ghoul Dan's skull was a super nuclear bomb. Usually, it could provide almost endless dark power, and it could also be detonated at a critical moment. In the original history, it was this thing that worked together with the dark portal that blew up the entire Draenor into pieces. Now, it was being used as a nuclear bomb to blow up Karazhan. Duque could imagine what would happen after Karazhan, an important part of the Azeroth dimensional barrier, was destroyed. The dimensional barrier of this planet was also a huge magic circle created by the Titans of Creation. Within the formation, the dragon aspect and the dragon race's power would be greatly amplified. If Karazhan, one of the spatial nodes, was destroyed, it would undoubtedly affect the entire magic circle. Of course, for the Burning Legion, it would be even better if they could kill one of the dragon aspects, Alexstrasza, in one go. That bastard kill Jaden, he actually predicted that I would ask Alexstrasza for help. Duque was trembling all over. He had been tricked. Without a doubt. This was the first time Duque had been fooled since he entered the world of Azeroth. Duque, who had been successful in every endeavor because he grasped the trend of history, finally suffered a small setback under the sneak attack of Kill Jaden, one of the final bosses of the Burning Legion. It wasn't that Duque hadn't thought of this possibility. Unfortunately, as he changed the history of the world more and more, many things were beyond his control and budget. This was the best proof of that. Originally, Kill Jaden would only appear to take away Zul's soul after he was defeated. He didn't know if it was because Duque had crippled Kazak in one go and slapped the faces of Kill Jaden's 2 female adjutants, causing the 2 coquettish bitches to go and complain about him. In the end, it directly led to Kill Jaden personally making a plan. It seems that we've been tricked. Alexstrasza sighed. Yes. Duque's face turned green. The queen patted Duque on the shoulder. Don't blame yourself too much. You've already done very well. Even I didn't react just now. If I had taken that explosion head-on, I'm afraid I would have been seriously injured even if I didn't die. When the queen said this, the people around her all felt a lingering fear. Think about it, this kind of big explosion that could be felt across several dimensions. How could a mortal's small body withstand it? The queen continued, for you to be able to do this at such a young age is already a miracle. There's no need to insist on miracles among miracles, understand? Duque's clenched fists finally relaxed. Understood. Speaking of which, what's going on outside? Sasha asked weakly. Duque quickly let the system check, and the results disappointed him. Sorry, the spatial turbulence is too serious. We have temporarily lost contact with the outside world. However, this explosion came from the dark portal on the other side of Draenor. It was like this when we were just connected, I'm afraid over there. Planet Draenor was probably going to explode just like in history. Duque's guess was right. It was precisely because Zul had placed the summoning ritual at the dark portal on the other side of Draenor. So when the skull of Gul'dan exploded, the first thing to explode was the dark portal on the other side. The orcs who were entrenched near the dark portal on Zul's orders fell into the deepest despair. Most of them didn't even react to the sudden explosion. In that instant, the originally calm dark portal suddenly had an extremely intense reaction. The black light it produced devoured all other colors in the world, making them unable to see anything. They could only vaguely hear the sharp howls of the wargs and the exclamations of their companions, but none of the orcs knew what was happening. That terrifying sound was quickly replaced by a rumbling sound. Just before they could realize what was happening, a deafening collision sound was heard. The orcs could not control their bodies and fell hard to the ground. The unlucky ones lost consciousness in an instant. For the powerhouses who still retained their consciousness, perhaps this was the real cruelty. As they struggled to breathe in pain, they suddenly found that the darkness had dissipated. When they immediately looked in the direction of the dark portal, it was already gone. The giant sculpture that guarded the dark portal had become a pile of stones that did not look the slightest bit similar. The three huge pillars that formed the frame of the portal, the three pillars that had witnessed the glory and greatness of the tribe, had also turned into rubble. There were no signs of Azeroth here. In the next moment, the entire world seemed to be screaming in the flames. The raging flames spread even further with the wind. Most of the land collapsed, and the huge impact crushed the entire land into broken waves that stacked up layer by layer. Every beastman next to the dark door was engulfed by that world-shaking explosion. Chapter 708. Zul. The call was full of mockery. It woke up the strongest orc warlock, the great chief of the tribe. Ah! The moment he regained consciousness, Zul screamed like a little girl who had been bullied. Of course, his screams were very unpleasant to hear. At the same time, all of his senses were filled with a strange feeling of nothingness. It was the feeling of his entire body floating in the weightless void. Zul squeezed his eyes shut, hoping to dispel the feeling that was enough to make him crazy. However, it was of no use. The howl from the depths of his soul kept eroding his consciousness. In the hypnotic repetition of the single sound, he once again heard the voice that made him extremely uncomfortable. Zul. He widened his eyes and looked around. Not far away, in the strange whirlpool of light and shadow, he saw something. It was the existence that imprisoned him here. Zul. The call of his name once again resounded in this dark space of nothingness. Zul felt that there was a bigger and darker shadow shrouding him. He looked up and saw the true face of the shadow that terrified him. It was a huge creature wearing blood-red armor. This creature's facial features were very similar to the Draenei that Zul had ordered to be slaughtered, but his face was bright red. There were two short curved horns on his tall temples, and he had a beard on his chin. Two tentacle-like things protruded from the bottom of his mouth. A few earrings shone, and his eyes flashed with a deep yellow light. Almost through the connection of their souls, Zul immediately knew the identity of this mysterious existence. Yes, it was Kill Jaden who had tricked his soul through a blood contract. In theory, this was the master that he had to serve for eternity. My lord. Zul gasped. Although his limbs were still imprisoned, he tried his best to bow to the other party. Ah. Zul, my little servant who is not pious enough. Kill Jaden, the demon commander of the Burning Legion, replied with a grin. Do you think that I have forgotten about you? No, my lord, of course not. In fact, Zul did hope that Kill Jaden would let him go like a fart, and then completely forget about him. Unfortunately, that didn't seem to be the case. You useless fellow, you ignored my orders and gave up on leading the orcs to attack Azeroth. He couldn't even bring a bomb into Karazhan. If it wasn't for your cowardly, summoning ritual, Azeroth would have one less annoying dragon aspect. You've disappointed me, and you've made me pay an unnecessary price. Do you know that? The demon commander laughed, and his ear-piercing voice sent chills down one's spine. No, master, I can make up for everything. Zul hurriedly changed his words. No, I've lost my patience with you. Now, it's time for you to pay for your failure. No, 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 no. The void echoed with Zul's screams. Pieces of flesh and blood were torn from Zul's body. The souls of the dead surrounded him and dug into his soul with their claws. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere, hovering in the air not far away. In the next moment, the flesh and blood returned to Zul's body, making his body as good as before. Then, it was torn apart again, and the cycle started again, along with the cruel torture. Kill Jaden's laughter continued to echo, and his huge demonic body also trembled with the laughter. That terrifying and strange laughter was enough to make Zul's soul and will collapse. This was just the beginning of the nightmare. In Karazhan, Duque sighed. He didn't need to think to know that Zul must have knelt down and become Kill Jaden's toy, just like in history. Then, it wouldn't be long before Kill Jaden, who was tired of playing, coerced Zul's helpless soul, and gave him one last chance to serve the Burning Legion. Otherwise, he would have to endure eternal torture. The weak Zul would once again accept the conditions set by the demon. His soul would be placed into a carefully carved block of ice. This block of ice, collected from the distant distorted void, was as hard as a diamond. The first Lich King was born. However, Duque couldn't care less about these things for the time being. There were too many things to do in front of him. 1/3 of Karazhan had been destroyed, and everything near the ruler's terrace had been destroyed. Even the surrounding stairs had been affected. Well, there were really broken stairs. The entire Karazhan Mage Tower was covered with shocking cracks, as if it had experienced a terrible earthquake. No, this was worse than an earthquake. Because an earthquake would not cause the spatial passage of Karazhan back to Azeroth to collapse. Now, there was no way out, and the spatial defense that had been set up before had almost completely collapsed. Now, a large number of void creatures rushed out of the spatial cracks, simultaneously attacking the main gate of Karazhan and the door of the library. Ha ha ha. An abandoned mage tower. Kill the guards. Rob him. Countless humanoid creatures wrapped in bandages, with their cores shining with mysterious radiance and illusory energy, charged into Karazhan. These creatures, which were 2 people tall, were called ethereals. They were a group of ethereal thieves that wandered the various voids, constantly looking for valuable items. Kill these invaders. Theon rode his Einherjar warhorse and took the lead, smashing down with his hammer. Beside him was Gavin Rad, and behind him were hundreds of translucent Einherjar warriors. Khadgar floated in the air, casting fire magic. Huge fireballs were thrown out one after another, hitting these fellows who valued money more than their lives, exploding into sparks. At the main entrance, Alexstrasza was guarding the gate, and no one could get through. With a flap of her illusory dragon wings, one of the void creatures that was rushing over screamed in pain and flew out of the main gate for nearly 1,000 meters before stabilizing itself. However, it immediately discovered that there was a mysterious flame spreading uncontrollably on its body, burning even in the void. It tried hard to extinguish the flames, but in the end, it was burned to ashes in front of its companions. It took a full 2 hours to destroy no less than 5 groups of enemies. Only then did those void creatures with a little bit of intelligence realize that this strange and mysterious building that suddenly floated into the void was not a pushover. Only then did they leave resentfully or watch from afar. Everyone returned to the top floor of the Mage Tower and gathered around Duque. "How is it?" Theon asked. "Very bad. In a sense, because of the Big Bang, Karazhan was separated from planet Azeroth." Duque rubbed between his eyebrows. "Ugh." Everyone's face darkened. Chapter 709. Can we go back? Tyrion asked. "I don't know. Because of the big explosion, the spatial passage that was originally connected to Azeroth collapsed. Karazhan can't go back the way we came, and to make matters worse, we've lost the spatial coordinates of Azeroth. We seem to be floating in the universe in the form of a spatial interlayer." This was the biggest headache for Duque. He had never thought that Karazhan could be blown away. In Duque's opinion, Karazhan was at most like the moon revolving around Earth. Now, it was like the moon had been blown out of the solar system. Not only was it not dead, it was blown away. This strange result made even Duque angry. "We really can't go back," Alexstrasza said helplessly with her hands on her hips. "Aren't you a dragon aspect? Shouldn't you be more capable than a radiant moon mage like me?" Duque said in annoyance. "Even dragon aspects have specializations, all right? I'm not good at spatial magic." The queen said angrily, "Speaking of which, you tricked me into coming to Karazhan, but I can't go back. If Azeroth encounters the Burning Legion's general attack, this will be on your head." "There won't be a general attack." Duque was very sure of this. At this time, the Titans had not kneeled yet. Sargeras had just been sent into the Abyss, and it would take some time for the Burning Legion to integrate. On the other hand, Kill Jaden also needed the Scourge to further consume the vitality of the world of Azeroth. However, before taking care of Azeroth, it seemed that he had to take care of himself first. Duque was speechless. Secretly, he had the system elf scan the situation of all of Karazhan. Not only was there a loss, but there was also oxygen. He didn't know if this counted as flying into outer space. If Karazhan became a real spaceship, then it would be terrible. Even if there were only 5 people and 1 dragon in all of Karazhan, and the oxygen consumption might not be high, once the oxygen was used up, no matter how powerful you were, you would still die. Host, Karazhan seems to still be able to get oxygen through some spatial cracks. According to calculations, it is not a problem to support the daily oxygen supply of 100 people. But the Karazhan seemed to be trapped. When Duque saw the 3-dimensional space model of Karazhan, which seemed to be entangled by tens of thousands of messy spider webs, Duque almost vomited blood on the spot. Every spider silk was a spatial crack of unknown power. If they tried to force their way through, who knew if Karazhan would be cut into pieces? When Duque projected this scene for the others to see, everyone's faces were filled with frustration. "Alright, I've heard enough bad news. Is there any good news?" Alexstrasza said helplessly. Duque snapped his fingers, and Khadgar immediately said, "The good news is that because Master Marcus was preparing to recruit more magic apprentices, he prepared enough food for 1,000 people in Karazhan for a year, as well as various ingredients and seasonings." Karazhan's chief butler, Khadgar, glanced at the Red Dragon Queen. "As long as we pay attention to the preservation of food and Her Majesty Alexstrasza's appetite isn't too shocking, we can last for 20 years without a problem." The queen's chest heaved up and down angrily. Humph! What a rude assumption. The eternal life of a dragon aspect is not sustained by eating. If there is a day when my magic is too low, I can still enter a deep sleep and endlessly stop my life. Stop talking. At most, I'll cook for you when you're awake. Duque silently labeled the queen as a foodie. That's good news. The queen's eyes narrowed into crescent moons. What else? Aurelia finally lost her temper. It seems I can occasionally receive a magical message. Unfortunately, I can only receive it. The message I send back cannot be received. How is the alliance? Gavin Rad asked. A great victory, without a doubt. Compared to the original history where both the Alliance and the Horde suffered heavy losses, the war was even shorter. With Duque's intervention, the war this time was even shorter. The aftermath of the explosion still spread through the dark portal to the blasted land, but it was really only at the level of aftermath. The scorching air that flowed out of the spatial rift that had not completely closed, together with the moderate shock wave of the explosion, scattered the orc army near the dark portal. Many of the beast men closest to the door of darkness were even blown away by the wind. However, this gave the Alliance a perfect opportunity to launch a surprise attack. Muradin was astonishingly bold. He directly pushed a large number of mortar teams to the vicinity of the dark portal as the dividing line between the north and south. This allowed the shells to hit the orc camp behind the dark portal without any hindrance. Encountering the moderate explosion of the dark portal and the collapse of the dark portal itself, all the orcs were suddenly exposed to the Alliance's artillery range. The shells could even pass through the ruins of the Horde camp and land on the southernmost cliff of the blasted land. Under Duque's guidance, the Alliance had long learned what creeping barrage and infantry-artillery coordination was. This tactic was only developed during the Second World War on Earth, and it had epoch-making significance for the current Azeroth. The continuous bombardment caused the beastmen to be completely stunned. Many orcs even thought that the explosions of the dark portal had never stopped. Every place plowed by the shells would be attacked by Haas or Turalian's cavalry in less than 30 seconds. The Alliance used their high-speed advance in coordination with the bombardment. Just 6,000 cavalry had disrupted nearly 50,000 orc infantry. Looking at the ruins of the dark portal that had disappeared into the blasted land, there was no more hesitation. Anduin had perfectly pressed all the reserves in one go. He had fought a textbook super victory. The chief of the Blood Ring clan, Kilrog Deadeye, had been killed by Danath Trollbane. The chief of the Bone Chewer clan, Harkin Skullbreaker, had been killed by Haas. The chief of the first generation of Death Knights, Tyran Gorfiend, had been destroyed by Turalian's Holy Light. This battle could be said to have wiped out the last essence of the Horde. However, after this battle, the Alliance was not in the mood to celebrate. Because the news came that Karazhan had disappeared. The founder of the Alliance, the greatest and wisest hero in the history of the Alliance, Duke Marcus, had disappeared. Even if Antonidas, Krasis, and the others searched and calculated like crazy, they could only deduce the horrifying answer that Karazhan had been destroyed in the vortex of space. No one was willing to believe that Duque, who seemed to be unkillable and had survived crisis after crisis, would fall because of the explosion of the dark portal. It was a pity. A week had passed. A month had passed. A whole year had passed. The Alliance had no choice but to declare Duque, Theon, Gavin Rad, Aurelia, and Sasha as missing in action. 3 years later, King Valley of Stormwind City erected a statue of them. They were known as the 5 Heroes of Karazhan. Chapter 710. Time flew. No matter how brave a warrior was, he would grow old one day. No matter how glorious a legend was, it would eventually be forgotten. In Brill city of the Rotterdam Luntiris forest, it had now become one of the well-known gladiatorial arenas of the Rotterdam Kingdom. There would be cruel and bloody gladiatorial performances every day. There were a total of 7 gladiatorial arenas of various sizes, and they were all full every day. The best gladiatorial performances were naturally in Rotterdam city. However, the one that was slightly inferior was Brill city. Now, let us welcome the invincible orc gladiator who has been undefeated for 88 consecutive matches, the brutal Gussa. As the MC shouted through the sound amplification magic, the enthusiasm of the 5,000 spectators was completely ignited. There were people from all directions, including noble local nobles, big businessmen who had made a lot of money, ordinary citizens who came to gamble and try their luck, and even young girls who were supposed to be knitting in their boudoirs. Everyone was shouting with all their might to vent the enthusiasm in their hearts. Gussa! 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 You have to win. I've bet all my salary for this month on you. Accompanied by the sound of heavy metal chains being twisted, a rather young but incredibly strong orc holding a crude stone axe walked out of the dark dungeon and into the arena outside. In front of him was a piece of black land. No matter how many times he tried it, he could not get used to the smell of blood in it. The blood that had coagulated into sludge had long been mixed with the black soil. There were those of his enemies, his compatriots, and himself. Be it the cheers of the humans or the smell of blood in the ground, he did not care. Shrugging his rugged nose, he shifted his gaze to the opposite side. The MC's voice sounded again. And his opponent today is a terrifying creature from the Alterac Snow Mountain that's even more brutal and inhumane than him. Guess what it is? A huge and powerful creature. Inside had yet to come out, but it had already become violent under the stimulation of the human voices. Bang, bang. Bang, the giant creature had already crazily hit the iron gate, which was as thick as a human's leg. Wah! As the MC wished, the audience let out a series of exclamations. There were cries of surprise from young girls, cheers from merchants, and even more gasps. Everyone, guess what that is? After he had his fill of suspense, the MC finally roared, the incomparably powerful Gussa, his opponent today is the Shattered Ridge Snowman King. As expected, the audience screamed even louder. In the eyes of the spectators, this was no longer a normal duel. A terrifying 5-meter-tall Snowman King against a 20-meter-tall orc warrior. This was a battle between an adult and a baby. But there was nothing the organizers could do. Gussa was too powerful. In the past 3 years, he had killed countless opponents. Among the opponents who were slightly close to him, there was no one that Gussa could not kill. Gussa had won too much, and the gamblers could no longer win much money. Even though the odds had reached 10-11, the commoners could still make a small profit even if they blindly bet on Gussa to win. This made the organizers very unhappy. But Gussa was so popular, they could not possibly kill him in private. This was Gussa's last duel. If he did not die, he could only be sold to Rotterdam City and let a stronger enemy kill him. It was said that there were even demonic creatures in Rotterdam's bloodiest arena. However, Gussa's master, Viscount Naris, was still disappointed. Facing the hill-like Snowman King, Gussa was still clean and efficient. When the Snowman King charged over, he immediately used charge and turned into a shadow. He rushed to the Snowman King's shoulder and used Thunderstrike to knock the Snowman King unconscious. Then, he immediately used Whirlwind Slash. After blinding the Snowman King, Gussa dodged the Snowman King's last struggle with an agile little jump. Then, he chopped the Snowman King's neck from the back with his axe. The Snowman King's head flew off just like that. Done! Ah! Gussa shouted in orc language that humans did not understand. Gussa once again returned to his dark and damp cellar. Just as he sat on his straw bed, a deep voice spoke in orc language from next door. "You've worked hard, Geir." No one knew that Gus's cellar was located in the deepest part of the underground. There was a secret passage just a wall away. If he wanted to, he could break the wall and leave this place at any time. This kind of monster is only enough for me to warm up. Don't humans have any new ideas? Geir, never underestimate humans. There are many strong humans. Gussa did not care about Geir's title. Instead, he asked, "How many are as strong as you?" Orgrim. Orgrim? It's actually Orgrim? Times had changed, and no one would have thought that Orgrim, who was supposed to have died in the underground prison of Rotterdam City, would appear in this small place, and talk to the young orc called Guile so discreetly through the wall. If you are talking about melee professions, there are at least 3. Anduin Lothar, Uther the Lightbringer, and Sedin Dathrahan. These are the human powerhouses that I need to pay attention to. Geir frowned. Other than the kings of the various countries, they are the most important? No. What I want to tell you today is that, be it the kings of the various countries or these 3 people, they are all trash compared to the man known as the nemesis of the orcs and the archenemy of the Horde. Remember the name I told you. Imprint it into the deepest part of your soul. Because, he is the main culprit behind the Horde's defeat in all 3 wars. Hearing this, Geir's muscles tensed up subconsciously. Even his breathing became lighter. Orgrim spoke, his name is Duke Marcus. At this moment, near a remote town in the continent of Rotterdam, lightning flashed and thunder roared. Strong winds blew. Countless bolts of lightning converged. The purplish-blue electric snakes twisted and finally carved out a large and standard circle on the ground. It was even rounder than a compass. The outside of the circle was charred black. The green grass and yellow soil were all replaced by black. In the middle of the circle, surprisingly, there was a naked young man. He posed like a statue of the thinker, although his muscles couldn't be considered fit at all. He looked like he deserved a beating. Who am I? Where am I from? Where am I going? Chapter 7:11. Coincidentally, Orgrim was asking Guile the same question in the cellar of Brill's Colosseum. Do you still remember the 3 questions I asked you? Yes. You asked, who are you? Where are you from? Where are you going? Guile replied in a steady voice. Then, have you thought of the answer? Yes, I have. Guile's voice was sonorous and powerful. Speak. Guile stood up abruptly and spoke in the orc language with a thunderous might. I am Guile, the son of the great Frostwolf tribe chief Durotan and the powerful female warrior Draka. I come from the other side of the dark portal, the planet that the humans call Draenor. I want to lead my orc brethren to escape from the human slavery and go to a place where the orcs can rest. On the other side of the wall, Orgrim also stood up excitedly. He and Guile had their backs against each other. Even though there was only a thin wall between them, he could feel the warmth from Guile's back through the wall and into his heart. Very good. Very good. If Durotan and Draka could see you in such a heroic state, they would definitely be very happy. Orgrim was very pleased. Does my answer have anything to do with that Duke Marcus you mentioned? If he's such an important person, why haven't I heard of his name in all my years in Lordaeron? Because his name is a taboo in Lordaeron. Orgrim spent a whole hour explaining how Duke had used a series of methods to destroy the Horde's attack, as well as the relationship between the Alliance and Lordaeron, as well as the relationship between Duke and King Tyreenas. Guile frowned. If this Duke is really so terrifying, then he will indeed be the biggest obstacle to our tribe's rebirth. But didn't you say that he's been missing for 10 years, and the Alliance has marked him as a dead man? Why do we still have to worry about him? Orgrim sighed. Some people are still alive, but he's already dead. Like Tarina's Menethil. I can even deal with an old fool like him. However, there is a type of person who is more terrifying in death than in life. This type of person is Duke Marcus. Orgrim's gaze seemed to pierce through the dark tunnel, through the boundless sky, back to the glorious days of war. After a long time, he said, if it's just Rotterdam, we only need to rescue our compatriots. We alone are enough to overthrow this country. However, things were different with the addition of the Eastern Kingdom. That is a completely different, higher-level world. A higher level? Have you ever seen a sailboat on Lordimir Lake? Yes. Do you know that the southern continent is using steam ships with smoke coming out from the top of the ship? Do you know that the southern continent can transport 10,000 soldiers at a speed faster than a horse for 1,000 miles in a day and a night? Do you know that humans can make 1,000 of the sharpest swords in an hour? And those cannons that can destroy a small mountain. Guile fell silent. This is the new thing that the man named Duke Marcus has brought to the world of Azeroth. Orgrim looked dispirited. My body is not old, but my brain can no longer keep up with the new things. I only know that if we fight for freedom in the old ways, it will only bring true destruction to the orcs and the horde. So, I put my hope in you, the person that the shaman prophesied. I hope that you can lead the orcs out of this cruel fate. I will. Guile said without hesitation. Do you have any other suggestions? Do in the main what you think. My last suggestion came from the shaman who persuaded me to protect you. He hoped that you would change your name to Thrall on the day of your rebellion. Thrall? Guile was confused. That was the name my subordinates gave you when they transferred you out of another slave camp. It was the name given to you by Lord Blackmore of Gerton. Why do I have to use the name given to me by a human slave master? Guile was filled with indescribable anger. Because this is a name of destiny. It represents the knowledge you have learned from humans, your integration with human culture, and your true destiny. Orgrim's voice became very solemn. Believe in the Lord. If not for his great sacrifice, you would have been killed by the assassins sent by Duque 13 years ago. Only by returning to destiny will the God of destiny protect you. Alright, I agree. From today onwards, my name is Thrall. Guile, no, Thrall replied loudly. Very well, you will not regret this, child of Duroden. I will leave the rest to you. Yes, orcs will never be slaves. Thrall gripped his axe tightly. At the same time, the young man who appeared in the lightning looked like he was in pain. He stood up with difficulty. F***ck, I've actually become Arnold Schwarzenegger. The young man looked around. Sigh, luckily there is no one around. Otherwise, I would definitely be treated as a pervert. As soon as he tried to move, his first movement made him stagger and he almost fell. It was obvious that he was not used to his body. My body. He looked down. His sword was still there. Even without testing, he knew it was normal. Damn, the wind blew the eggs cold. Since it was functioning normally, the other tests could be ignored. No. Pft, pft, pft. After checking again and again, he finally confirmed that his body was intact. He was surprised and happy. After suffering for so long, he had finally returned to Azeroth. Even though he had been through countless dangers and seen countless storms, he could not help but feel a little excited. Finally, he took a deep breath and shouted, ha ha ha. Azeroth. I, Duhan San, have returned to harm you. For a moment, the sky was filled with lightning and thunder. It was as if Azeroth could not wait to strike this scourge down. I must be joking. This is actually the aftermath of teleportation. Aftermath. Yes. He was the handsome duke that everyone hated, flowers withered at the sight of him, and cars had flat tires at the sight of him. Taking a deep breath of the fresh air of Azeroth, Duque, who had experienced the cruelty of long-distance teleportation across the universe, finally realized his current situation. Damn, a lot of my magic circuits have been burned. F***ck, my storage bag is finished. Damn, I'm still naked. No, before thinking about that, I need to wash the dust off my body. It's so uncomfortable. Duque, who did not dare to use magic for the time being, ran to a nearby stream to take a bath. Just as Duque was washing up, a soft sound suddenly came from behind. Duque turned around and saw a girl looking at him in shock. The next moment, Duque complained, "Why are you peeping at me while I'm bathing?" Chapter 712. Once upon a time, before Duque had transmigrated, there had been such a fatty. It had been a large gathering, and many people had been assigned to various rooms in the hotel. One of the girls had probably been confused and remembered the wrong room number, thinking that it was her roommate inside. In the end, the girl rang the doorbell and found that the person who opened the door was a pale fatty with only a bath towel draped over his lower body. The scene was extremely awkward, but this guy was the first to react. He screamed, "Molestation." He slammed the door shut, leaving the confused girl outside feeling extremely wronged. Right. Duke had done the same thing, but by different means. No matter what happened, he had to scare the other party first. Duke's words smashed into the white-haired girl's head, causing her to be dumbfounded. After a long time, she finally reacted. You, after saying, "you," 3 times, she could not continue. The girl was obviously very pure, but she already looked like she was about to cry. Seeing this, Duque could not bear to see her like this. "Sorry, I was just joking." Duque's dog eyes unexpectedly saw this girl wearing a red priest's robe. It was summer, and her legs were very white. "Where are you looking?" The girl suddenly became alert and raised the staff in her hand. That's right, this was a naked man. What if he went berserk? No, you misunderstood. I saw that your clothes are very familiar. Are you from the Scarlet Crusade? Duque was not sure, so he asked tentatively. It's the Scarlet Crusade. The girl corrected. Actually, I'm not a member of the army. I just borrowed clothes to wear. The pure young girl's true colors were immediately revealed. Although Scarlet Crusade and Scarlet Crusade only had a difference of one word, the meaning was very different. The former was a fanatical organization, while the latter only represented a legion of the Kingdom of Lordaeron. Duque instantly grasped the general timeline. Huh. Seems like it's not too late for me to roll back. Sorry. I'm from the mountains. I lost a bet and was thrown into the water by my buddy, then washed down the river. Can I ask, what time is it now? Which year? Looking at Duque, who was half submerged in the water and giving off a suspicious aura, the young lady gripped her staff tightly and took half a step back. Her eyes were filled with wariness and distrust. However, she still answered Duque. It's year 15 of the Dark Portal. You're currently near Terran Mill in the Hillsbrad Hills. Mr. Suspicious. Hey! Am I being despised? Am I, who is handsome, elegant, and charming, is being looked down upon? At this moment, Duque could not stop crying in his heart. 10,000 alpacas galloped through his mind. After a while, Duque came back to his senses. Sorry, I'm not the kind of person you think I am. The young girl was still vigilant. Her large watery eyes and white hair made her expression seem even colder. She was clearly saying that he was that kind of pervert. Duque lost his temper. You're a priest, right? For the sake of the holy light, can you get me a set of clothes? The young girl lightly pursed her bright red lips. Since the other party was already using the holy light, she finally nodded. She then faced Duque and took 3 steps back. After making sure that Duque could not jump out of the river, the young girl turned around and ran without looking back. This. Sigh. Just when Duque thought that the young girl would break her promise and was about to use leaves to make a grass skirt to cover her body, the young girl still came back with a set of rough linen clothes and a young man who acted as her protector. The young man was very tall and had a steady look, but his short beard revealed that he was less than 16 years old. His trembling left hand on the hilt of his sword revealed his guilt. Of course, Duque would not do anything to them. When the young girl turned around, Duque quickly went ashore and used the cloth that the young man had left on the shore to dry his body. He then put on the rough linen clothes that he had not worn for many years. Ugh, what a nostalgic feeling. When I first transmigrated, I seemed to have worn this too. Seeing that although Duque's origins were strange, he did not seem to have any ill intentions, the young man slightly lowered his guard. Mister, may I ask what your name is? Duque. Duque casually replied. What about you guys? Thank you for your help. I would like to at least know your names. Reynolds. Sorry. The young boy and girl only said their names, but just like Duque, they purposely ignored their surnames. However, when Sari heard Duque's name, she revealed a look of yearning. Ah. You're also called Duque. After the last great battle, many people's children are called Duque. Hearing this, Duque could not help but smile. In the entire world, there is only one Duque. Reynolds said solemnly. Sari did not refute. Alright, as a knight candidate, I cannot sit by and watch a stranger wander around here alone. After all, it is not safe around here recently. Mr. Duque, I strongly suggest that you come with us. Reynolds suddenly said. Not safe? Hearing this, Duque frowned. Yes, this is not confirmed news. However, there have been many strange humanoid monsters recently. What kind of monsters are they? They look like humans, but they eat and bite people. They have dark gray skin. Duque's expression suddenly changed. Damn, the Scourge army has appeared. This is really bad news. Duque found that he could not determine what time it was. However, it was obvious that Zul had begun to exert his power as the Lich King. However, whether it was the cursing sect secretly stirring up trouble, or Arthas had already fallen, this was still unknown. Let's go. Bring me to Alexandros Mograine, or Alfred Abendis. Duque's expression darkened. He turned around and walked away, not caring if the boy and girl followed him or not. After living in Azeroth for so long, experiencing 3 big battles and facing countless hardships, Duque knew what he had to do. Upon hearing these 2 names abruptly, the young Reynolds seemed to have been greatly stimulated. He looked like he was startled. In the Scarlet Cross army, it was impossible for the boy and girl not to know what these 2 names meant. What shocked them was Duque's tone. After all, these 2 lords weren't just any Tom, Dick, or Harry. Looking at the whole world, how many people would dare to call them by their names? However, this mysterious Duque dared to do so. He really wanted to scold this Duque, how dare you? However, the man's natural and typical aura of a superior made Reynolds involuntarily obey the man's lofty orders. This way. Chapter 713. Walking on the narrow path in the forest, Duque had a lot on his mind. Yes. He had returned, but he was in a terrible state. Although he looked fine on the outside, he was the only one who knew how hard it had been to play interstellar travel. He was the first to come back. He had to do this. Karazhan was wrapped in a spider web of countless spatial cracks in the depths of the spacetime tunnel. Apart from him, no one else could come out. Although Alexstrasza could transform into human form, the amount of mana needed to teleport her was too great. Apart from her, no one else was good at magic. Although Khadgar was much stronger, the problem was that this ghost mage was almost an earthbound spirit, and it was difficult for him to leave Karazhan. In the end, after being trapped for too long, Duque still teleported back alone after preparing for a long time. It had been an extremely dangerous journey. Even with the help of the system elf, Duque had almost died in the void. After all, there were many times when one had to change directions at supersonic speeds 3 or 4 times in a second. This was really not something a human could do. But after returning, Duque had 2 serious problems. First, he had burned many magic circuits. Roughly speaking, his power had temporarily fallen to the level of an ordinary radiant moon mage. But if he was given some time to reorganize his magic circuits, it should not be a problem for him to rush back to the half-step breaking dawn he had once achieved in Karazhan. Second, the system elf seemed to have gone silent. No matter how he called out, there was no response. He did not know whether it was the solar storm or the influence of the spatial magnetic field, but the system elf was temporarily on its knees. Both greatly affected Duque's strength. As Duque walked, he asked Renaud about the current situation. Even though he had scared Renaud, Renaud still tried to answer his questions carefully and selectively. Through Renaud, Duque at least learned a few important pieces of information. Over the past 10 years, Rotterdam had been constantly nibbling away at the original Alterac territory. Now, apart from South Shore, which had been upgraded to the South Sea city-state and gained autonomy, the rest of the territory basically belonged to Rotterdam. However, the shattered ridge that was originally part of Alterac Royal City was abandoned by the Rotterdam Kingdom due to the large number of snowmen occupying it and the fact that they had failed to clear it out many times. King Lang Rin was assassinated by an orc sword saint in the 8th year of the Dark Portal. Since then, Anjouan Lothar had been the regent to assist the young King William. However, in the past 2 years, Duke Bolvar Fordragon had been the regent due to Lothar's poor health. When he heard Reynolds say that the holy city of Stratholme was fine, Duque felt a little relieved. In that case, according to the original history, Arthas should not have fallen. If that was the case, the situation did not seem to be the worst. However, when Duque asked about Arthas's situation, Reynolds became even more vigilant. "Didn't you tell Sally that you were from the mountains? Why do you care so much about Arthas?" Duque felt wronged. Duque was rather speechless at the vigilance of this pair of underage boys and girls. Just as Duque was about to say something, the wind suddenly brought with it a terrible stench. Sally covered her mouth, and even Reynolds, who looked like a protector, had a hard time holding back the urge to vomit. It was the unique smell of a slaughterhouse, with a hint of disgusting sweetness. No, it was not the smell of fresh meat, but the stench of rotting corpses. It had been too long since Duque had smelled something like this. Only after burying corpses on the battlefield for a few days would there be such a smell. The rotting smell came from a house near the forest path. It was now very clear what had happened inside. Sally turned to Reynolds. Her face was pale but determined. "I have to go in and check. If there are dead souls inside that I need to expiate." Suddenly, along with the poisonous gas of death, a horrifying shriek filled the entire forest. Something pounced at them from inside and behind the house at an alarming speed. Without hesitation, Reynolds immediately pulled out the sword at his waist and pointed it at the intruder with a trembling sword tip. Following the light from the tip of the sword, Reynolds' eyes met a pair of pitch-black eye sockets. Reynolds, who had never been on a real battlefield, was shocked to find that he did not know how to react to this walking nightmare. It wore a tattered shirt and work clothes, holding a pitchfork as a weapon. It should have been a farmer in the past, but that was when it was alive. Right now, it was clearly a dead person. Grayish-green rotting flesh fell off its bones, and rotten fingers left filthy marks on the handle of the pitchfork. Black sticky liquid flowed out of the pustules. It howled, stinking saliva dripping from the corner of its black mouth. Sally cried out in alarm. This cry seemed to have frightened Reynolds. He was stunned for a moment, and almost couldn't raise his sword in time before he was stabbed by the pitchfork. Fortunately, his years of training had formed his body's combat instincts. He managed to knock the pitchfork out of the zombie's hand with his sharp sword, and then he swung his sword horizontally across the zombie's neck. The neck that had lost its tenacity gave Reynolds a disgusting feeling, as though he had cut a pile of rotten grass. Then, the filthy head flew into the air, and a stinking liquid sprayed out from the severed neck, splattering half of Reynolds' face. After losing its head, the thing fell flat on its back and never got up again. As a priest in training, Sally used a holy light spell. Even though she knocked down a zombie, it was replaced by even more zombies. This was far more than what the two of them could handle. "Sally, run!" Reynolds cried out in alarm. Even though his hands were trembling, he still chose to let the lady run first. At this moment, the two of them suddenly heard whooshing sounds. It was the sound of something breaking through the air. Countless fireballs flew past them, hitting the bodies of the swarming zombies. The fireballs exploded, and while the disgusting monsters were blown away, the stench in the air was immediately replaced by the smell of burnt flesh. The noisy roars of the monsters had been reduced by 90%, and the clearest sound in the air was the crackling of the flames. In the distance, more zombies tried to rush over. Reynolds and Sally looked back at the same time, only to see 10 small flames burning steadily on Duque's slender fingertips, like 10 harmless orange flowers. The next moment, the flames poured out, turning into huge fireballs the size of water tanks that smashed towards the group of monsters. In a few moments, dozens of monsters were kneeling. Sally asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you?" "You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.